Order, please, members. Welcome, Mr. Morrissey. It's good to have an Islander here. Okay, I notice on the sheet that this is meeting number 90 of the committee. We'll approaching 100. Will we get to 150? Anyway, pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, May 9th, 2017, Bill C-44, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget, tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 2017, and other measures. That is what the hearing is about today. And with us we have 5 witnesses. Mr. Harford, who's President, Canadian Vintners Association. Mr. Souter, a board member with Devonian Coast Wineries, not pronounced right. Okay. Oh, Beer Canada, Mr. Harford.
I'll be whatever you need me to be.
Canadian Vintners Association, Mr. Souter, board member, Devonian Coast Wineries, Mr. Sparks, President and CEO, Restaurants Canada, Joyce Reynolds, Executive Vice President, and Spirits Canada, Mr. Westcott, President and CEO. And I do know that a couple of people went out of their way to change travel arrangements. I believe one person was supposed to be even in Spain, so we appreciate that effort, Mr. Sparks, to get here to give your information to committee. So the floor is yours. We'll try and hold your comments to about 5 minutes. And then we'll go to questions, starting with Mr. Harford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the legislative process on behalf of the 45 Canadian beer companies I represent. My members are large and small domestic brewers from all 10 provinces and 1 territory. My members have 2 concerns with Budget 2017. First, it imposed an immediate 2% increase to excise duty rates on beer. The abruptness was very disruptive to normal business operations. The second and most serious concern is the escalator, the mechanism that will increase excise rates automatically every year with no requirement to check in on the health of the domestic brewing industry. The immediate 2% increase is not helpful, but it doesn't compare to the damage the escalator will have on our domestic brewers. I will use the few minutes I have to offer 4 reasons for removing the escalator from Bill C-44. First, tying the Consumer Price Index to excise is too rigid and ignores regional economic differences. Second, the escalator bypasses Parliament's role in approving tax increases. Third, Finance Canada has acknowledged it did not analyze the economic impact of the escalator and what it will have on our industry. And fourth, there appears to be a large discrepancy in Canada's public accounts that would make it difficult for policymakers to say anything about the effectiveness of excise duties. The Consumer Price Index reflects the cost of a fixed basket of commodities over time. It tells policymakers nothing about what is going on in our sector or in a particular region of the country. I'm going to use Atlantic Canada to demonstrate why linking excise to CPI is too rigid and insensitive to regional differences. Over the last 5 years, the total volume of beer in Atlantic Canada declined by 3.3%, while CPI, the Consumer Price Index, increased by 5.5%. If the escalator had been in place, the government would have increased the tax on beer every year while Atlantic-based brewers struggled to adjust to lower demand. The escalator would have made a difficult situation in Atlantic Canada worse. The escalator means annual tax increases on Canadians and Canadian businesses with no parliamentary oversight. The escalator will run in the background, resulting in higher beer taxes every year. Section 53 of the Constitution Act, at least in principle, should cause the government to pause on introducing a tax policy like the escalator. It requires that bills for imposing any tax originate in the House of Commons. Finance Canada advised this committee last week that it did not analyze the impact higher excise duties will have on the domestic beverage alcohol industry. It likely did not consider the impact on the hospitality industry either. It reasoned that the tax increase would be small on a per case or per bottle basis. The department has ignored the compounding tax-on-tax implications of the escalator and that Canadians already pay the third highest beer taxes in the world. But there's a bigger point. The budget plan highlights that the government anticipates taking an additional $470 million in excise duties over the next 5 years because of the automatic increases. I can tell you with absolute confidence there is no one in the domestic beverage alcohol industry that agrees with Finance Canada's forecast that the government can anticipate status quo while it takes an additional $500 million out of the productive use of the Canadian beverage alcohol producers. The 2016 public accounts report excise revenues from beer to be $584 million for the fiscal year. This appears to be an underrepresentation of what actually is collected in excise on beer. And it's like this every year. For fiscal 2016, Statistics Canada reports total beer sales for the country at 22.9 million hectoliters. With excise rates at $31.22 per hectoliter, the total revenues should be closer to $713 million, a $130 million gap from what is reported in public accounts. Budget 2017 talks about excise rates having not increased since the mid-'80s and pins the rationale for imposing the escalator as a way to maintain the effectiveness of excise duties. There's no explanation for what constitutes effectiveness. But looking at the volumes of beer sold and the rates of excise in place from 1985 to 2016, the amount of excise remitted to the federal government has increased from $385 million to $713 million. That's an 85% hike. Over this time period, per capita consumption of beer declined from 103 liters to 76 liters, a 26% drop. The domestic brewing community is counting on the honourable members of this committee to remove the escalator and demonstrate that by effective, the government does not mean higher taxes at the expense of a healthy domestic brewing industry. My plan for this afternoon was to provide the committee with 4 reasons for removing the escalator from Budget 2017. I appreciate the opportunity to present these arguments on behalf of my 45 brewing members and indeed the broader brewing industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Souter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow MPs. I am grateful for the opportunity to appear here today and present the Canadian wine industry's perspective on Bill C-44, the Budget Implementation Act. My name is Murray Souter, and I sit on the board of directors of the Canadian Vintners Association. I'm also the president and CEO of Diamond Estates Wines and Spirits, located in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario. Diamond Estates is the home of a wide selection of top-selling VQA wines, including Lakeview Cellars, Eastdale Estates, 20 Bees, Fresh, and the wines of the Canadian acting legend Dan Aykroyd. In the few minutes I have, I want to provide you a snapshot of our national wine industry, Ontario's economic impact within it, as well as explain what the excise duty is and why the excise duty and CPI should not be linked. First, let me highlight some facts at the national level. The Canadian wine industry is made up of almost 700 wineries and 1,300 independent growers, contributing $9 billion to the national economy. We produce 2 types of products: premium 100% Canadian VQA wines, which contribute a $4.5 billion in economic impact, and value-priced international Canadian blends made from imported and domestic content, which also contribute $4.5 billion in contribution. In Ontario specifically, the economic impact of the grape and wine industry equates to $4.4 billion, with Ontario being the largest wine and grape-producing province in Canada. In 2015, it generated 18,000 jobs, over $750 million in federal, provincial taxes, and liquor board markup. This is up from $600 million in 2011. For every dollar spent on Canadian wine in Ontario, almost $4 in GDP is generated across the province. Budget 2017 is sending a mixed message to Canadians. On one hand, it draws from the Prime Minister's Economic Council on Economic Growth, which identifies Canada's value-added agri-food industry as an engine for growth and at the same time proposes a 2% increase in the excise duty on Canada's highest value-added product, wine. The government is proposing in the budget bill to amend the Excise Act to legislate the annual indexation of wine excise duty to the Consumer Price Index effective April 1, 2018, meaning the rate is set to increase every year. Budget 2017 states that the excise duty rates on alcohol products have not effectively changed since the mid-1980s. This, in fact, is not true. The last increase was in 2006 when the excise duty increased 21% by 10.8 cents per litre to 62 cents per litre. Our industry is concerned that over the next 5 years, assuming a moderate rate of 2% inflation, the excise rate will increase by a cumulative 11%. Since the excise duty is a cost at the front of the price chain, the impact is cumulative with ad valorem liquor board markup, GST, PST adding to the consumer impact. The GST already already picks up inflation on the producer price. By indexing excise, the price chain would pick up double inflation and multiply it through the price chain. The impact on domestic wine pricing of adding the excise tax at a rate of 63 cents per litre is to add an additional 90 cents to the retail price in an already price-sensitive, highly competitive market. This legislated annual tax increase is also too rigid. It will tie the hands of future governments, and it fails to account for non-inflationary impacts facing the industry. It does not allow Parliament to do its job to ensure all measures are considered for all future tax increases. Wine is amongst the highest value-added agricultural products in Canada, yet many of our grape growers would face economic hardship due to this tax increase. My company, Diamond Estates, is one of only 2 publicly traded wine companies in Canada. As such, we depend on the public markets in order to raise capital for expansion and growth. Just 6 months ago, our organization was able to conclude a significant capital raise to support our winery capacity expansion. This expansion was necessary to ensure continuity of supply for our fast-growing retail and export businesses. However, today's capital markets are both well-informed and very savvy investors, and the contemplated changes in the excise tax regime are creating uncertainty and risk. That uncertainty is jeopardizing future capital raises necessary to support the planned doubling of our business over the next 5 years. And more importantly, it jeopardizes the jobs that accompany that growth. Imports represent 70% of wine sales in Canada, and with import tariffs soon to be eliminated under CETA, the proposed annual excise tax escalator will seriously damage our ability to compete. With the recent challenge against Canada at the World Trade Organization regarding the BC wine sold in grocery and the renegotiation of NAFTA, it is clear that imports want more of our market and are willing to challenge us on all fronts. Our industry is rooted in Canada. We literally simply cannot uproot and take our business elsewhere. Wine is one of Canada's signature industries that should be supported and promoted by our federal government, not selectively targeted. Recommendation 54 of your committee's 11th report, presented December 7, 2016, Creating the Conditions for Economic Growth, recommends that the Government of Canada support innovation in the Canadian wine sector through improved operational and infrastructure investments. The wine industry can be a strong contributor to the agri-food powerhouse that Canada is creating, which would strengthen our competitiveness domestically and abroad. However, this escalator will put economic growth on pause. The Canadian wine industry can help the government create more jobs, more wealth, and opportunities, but this starts with eliminating the excise escalator tax under the Budget 2017. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sparks.
Thank you, Chair Easter and members of the committee. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today representing my company, Devonian Coast Wineries, the largest winery in Atlantic Canada and the 7th largest in Canada, as well as the Winery Association of Nova Scotia and its growers, in all approximately 125 farm-based businesses. We appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to share our perspective on Bill C-44. The wine industry of Nova Scotia has been a shining light contributing to the revitalization of several rural communities in the province. The immensely positive contribution to the region is manifest across sectors of agriculture, manufacturing, retail, and tourism. Indeed, in the recent study in 2016 revealed that the annual economic impact of the wine industry on the province has surpassed $216 million and is growing. That's massive for our region. We are the newest but fastest growing wine region in the country, attracting investment and excitement in parts of the province where agriculture and tourism had long been in decline. With the level of upfront investment required and the long gestation period for vineyard, wine, and market development, many of our business models are fragile if burdened with additional cost and regulation. The decision to increase federal excise duty rates on beverage alcohol undermines the government's own objective of creating a business environment where manufacturers, particularly agri-food processors, can thrive and export abroad successfully. The budget proposal to automatically adjust federal excise duties to CPI is a return to the failed policies of the past. Between 81 and 86, annual automatic adjustments to alcohol excise duties resulted in massive job losses and plant closures across this country. We elect MPs to protect us and debate tax increases. This budget proposal takes their ability away and risks other taxes being implemented in a similar fashion. The logic of attaching an annual increase to consumer price increase is also fundamentally and particularly flawed, as this excise is an input tax, not a sales tax. This means that the real inflationary impact of applying the excise escalator on the raw material would translate into making our industry sector superinflation, would seriously damage our industry as consumers would shift to lower-priced imports and away from Canadian-made wine. Canadian producers like our company would be faced with the choice of increasing prices to offset the input cost increases or absorb the increase in order to hold market share. Neither option is sustainable for any manufacturer, let alone one that deals with the inherent variability and uncertainty of agriculture. But that's far from the biggest threat to the Canadian wine industry. International trading partner countries who have supported the 100% Canadian content exemption since 2006 are now giving notice that if this escalator goes into legislation, while the exemption is perfectly legal, that it, as well as other industry measures, will be challenged at the WTO level. Should the outcome be the likely reinstatement of the excise tax for 100% Canadian wine, almost immediately there would be operation shuttering, as the tax on the finished wine would be the equivalent of a 50% increase in the cost of our grapes. That is massive. Layoffs would be abundant throughout, plantings would come to a halt, and the industry would end its tremendous growth trajectory. In the case of my own company's operations, I would likely lay off about 30% of our collective employees, terminate many grower contracts, and try to sell 2 of my 3 wineries if, in fact, there would be any buyer available under these conditions. In Atlantic Canada, one of our few successful agricultural industries would be crippled. Having made a sizable investment to enter in this industry 5 years ago, acquiring the largest winery in the region, we continue to invest every year and have doubled our volume in those 5 years. We compete in our own backyard with global wine corporations whose governments do not tax them at home, but rather subsidize them to the hilt. At the same time, our provincial monopolies' retail markups, along with the HST and excise, make us the highest domestic tax jurisdiction in the world. The only subsidy in our wine industry is coming from owners themselves, like me. The data supports a known fact that the Canadian wine industry punches well above its weight class in economic, cultural, and overall quality of life in Canada. Our growing presence abroad not only represents the best example of value-added agriculture, indeed it enhances the perception of the entire Canadian brand. Our economic impact now tops $9 billion. For our federal government to unwittingly place our industry at such risk is disturbing, to say the least. But to persist in legislating an annual indexation on our costs after learning of those risks would be unconscionable. We ask that you repeal the indexation of the excise tax from the Budget Implementation Act 2017. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for your time and attention today.
Thank you very much. Ms. Reynolds, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Easter and committee members. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon about Part 3 of Bill C-144 on behalf of Canada's $80 billion restaurant industry. This industry is a vital part of the country's economy. Canadians operate restaurants in every corner of Canada, from large metropolitan centres to remote communities. We are the 4th largest private sector employer in Canada, with 1.2 million employees who interact with 18 million Canadians daily. A significant number of these jobs are derived from the sale of wine, beer, and beverage alcohol in licensed establishments. We are most proud to be the #1 first-time creator of jobs in the country. We open the door of opportunity to youth, new Canadians, and those facing barriers to employment. Every dollar spent at a restaurant generates an additional $1.85 in spending in the rest of the economy, well above the average for all industries in Canada. We indirectly employ more than 250,000 Canadians. More than two-thirds of Canada's restaurants are locally owned and operated by independent entrepreneurs. Our 95,000 restaurants, cafeterias, coffee shops, and bars are gathering spots from people from all walks of life to celebrate, to do business, to spend time with family and friends. Restaurants are also one of the top 3 reasons for tourists to make Canada their chosen destination. However, you also need to know that we are an industry with razor-thin profit margins. The average restaurant in Canada takes home a mere 4.3% before taxes. According to Stats Canada, drinking places, that would be the bar and pub sector, have experienced sales declines in 6 out of the last 8 years. Since 2000, the number of drinking places has plummeted by 40%. Beverage alcohol is an important input for restaurants and food service operators who purchase approximately $3 billion of these products each year, but alcohol prices in Canada have reached the point of diminishing returns with stagnating sales to licensees. What most Canadians don't know is that licensees often pay more for a case of beer, for a bottle of wine, or a bottle of spirits than consumers purchasing them at their provincial retail store. Once restaurants include the cost of service, glassware, overhead, rent, staffing, and staffing includes training of all servers in the responsible service of alcoholic beverages, it becomes very expensive for the average Canadian to enjoy a glass of wine, a pint of beer, or a cocktail with their meal. You can't imagine the surprise of our members when government elected to add more taxes, not less, to alcohol, one of the highest taxed commodities in the country, and to increase the tax in perpetuity. We've heard from small-town restaurant and pub operators who are struggling to keep their businesses afloat with rising labor, food, utility, and rent costs. The cumulative effect of the new excise duties will take another big chunk out of their businesses. This is real dollars that cannot be used for hiring staff, investments in innovation, and refurbishing their businesses, and in some cases, remaining viable. Last week, we heard from Mr. Colomb from the Department of Finance during his testimony to this committee. And I know that restaurants were disheartened to hear that the department believed the excise taxes would be so small that it wasn't necessary to analyze the economic impacts. A tax increase from $30 million to almost $500 million in 5 years is not insignificant, particularly when you consider that the tax will be part of the base price to which all other fees, levies, markups, and provincial and federal taxes will be layered on. The cascading nature of provincial markups and PST, GST, or HST application will mean price increases of up to 3 times the amount of the federal excise tax for those who purchase alcohol. This year's federal budget identifies agri-food as a potential growth sector, but a very broad swath of agri-food industries will be hurt by this compounding tax. The hospitality industry, together with the vintners, the brewers, the distillers, the grape and grain growers, and our related supply chain partners, are seeking this committee's support in repealing the annual excise duty escalator in Bill C-44 to ensure that all tax increases have the oversight of parliamentarians and that economic impacts and considerations are factored in. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning to Mr. Westcott. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jan Westcott, and I'm the President and CEO of Spirits Canada. Spirits Canada is the sole national organization representing Canadian spirits manufacturers, exporters, and consumers. My remarks today are expressed not only for these affected parties, but also on behalf of the thousands of Canadian SMEs providing critical goods and services to spirits producers, as well as those of Canadian cereal grain farmers, farmers of barley, corn, rye, and wheat, so intrinsic to the domestic production of distilled spirits. Given limited time today, I'm going to focus my comments on the ill-conceived suggestion that we return to the failed policies of the past and reintroduce automatic indexing of liquor excise duties. As my colleagues have said, members have heard testimony from the Department of Finance officials that no, and I underline no, economic analysis or modeling was undertaken to support the indexing of excise duties on beer, wine, and spirits, since, in their view, The changes were too minor to warrant such effort. Thankfully, it's extremely rare that we hear such misguided hubris from public officials here in Ottawa. The department's own supplementary budget information indicates that these measures will expropriate in excess of $470 million between now and 2022, a calculation based solely from the direct increase in excise duties. In what bubble is an additional $470 million lifted from the wallets of hardworking Canadians trivial or de minimis? The department, however, has provided no estimate of the entire overall impact to Canadian consumers of their proposed indexing measure, taking into account the compounding effect of a subsequent cascading ad valorem provincial and federal taxes such as the GST. Finance has a worrisome penchant to look at liquor excise duty in isolation, disregarding liquor taxes imposed by other levels of government, its impacts on employment and investment, ignoring the ultra-competitive nature of the international whiskey trade. And just by the way, I'm going to stop here. Excise in Canada is 67, that's right, you heard me, 67% higher than excise on spirits in the United States. And dismissing the windfall gains for Treasury thanks to the GST, particularly on sales through on-premise channels like bars and restaurants. Best practices in other jurisdictions include the issuance of white papers, consultation papers, transparent decision-making processes, and above all, rigorous economic analysis. All these best practices have been noticeably absent from the process to introduce automatic indexing to Canada's liquor excise duties. Our own internal analysis indicates an overall impact in excess of $1 billion by 2022, not the 470 you're hearing, or more than double the amount identified in the supplementary budget papers. That is $1 billion hijacked from your neighbors' pockets, whether enjoying an occasional drink at home, with friends, or in the tens of thousands of licensed bars, restaurants, and lounges in every city, town, and village in Canada. But still not worthy of a formal impact statement because, stunningly, it's viewed by some as too small. Perhaps it's more accurate and to the point to state that no formal analysis is required since we already know the impact. We have lived this same nightmare scenario previously. Canada experimented with automatic indexing of liquor taxes between 1981 and 1986, with devastating consequences for Canadian workers. The spirits industry alone shuttered a dozen production facilities across the country in that decade, putting those Canadian workers out of jobs. Those plants never reopened. Those jobs never returned to Canada. We downsized our businesses, reduced our grain purchases, scaled back our investment in foreign markets, eviscerated our innovation budgets, and tried to hold on for survival. Eventually, after the imposition of devastating harm by our own government and the loss of the only livelihood available to thousands of Canadian families, it was recognized, even here in Ottawa and in Parliament, that the automatic indexing of excise duties on alcohol products in accordance with a rigid formula such as CPI was completely inappropriate and indexing was abandoned. The automatic indexing of excise duties on alcohol in accordance with a rigid formula such as CPI was not appropriate then, and it is not appropriate now. It is said that only a fool learns from his own mistakes, and it is a wise man who learns from the mistakes of others. I have little doubt as to the wisdom of the honourable members present and hope we can count on your support for an amendment to repeal the proposed automatic indexing of excise duties. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you all for your presentations. You obviously called it as you see it. Turning to first round of questions, 7 minutes, Mr. Sabara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday, I guess. Just kind of my view of the landscape. I look at the wine industry in Canada as a Canadian success story. Call it as you may, a Canadian success story. But it's bigger than that. It's about culture. It's about tourism. It's about engaging people. It's having U.S. visitors come to Canada and from my vantage point in Vaughan, driving down to Niagara-on-the-Lake for the weekend, which I probably did before I had kids, but after you have kids, it changes a little bit. But so I understand the importance of the industry and such. I do wish to ask about. You've expressed some fears and concerns about the impact that the escalator would have on the industry, and I specifically want to zero in on what would the investment environment be, because people are making decisions to employ, whether it's your grape growers, your bottlers, and we know that the Ontario food and beverage industry is the largest manufacturer employer in the province, even larger than automotive. So we know it's a very important industry, and I'd like to get a sense of what you think would be the impact on investment, on employment, in terms of with the escalator. I'll put that out there, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. As you know, it is a huge economic driver in our province. You mentioned Niagara-on-the-Lake, or Niagara Falls, which is where I am. The #1 tourist attraction now in Niagara-on-the-Lake, or Niagara Falls, is no longer one of the natural wonders of the world, but actually the wine industry and people doing tours. We see the escalator as having really two impacts. One is when it's applied against the ICB business, which is about 50% of the sales in Ontario of domestic produced wines, it makes them uncompetitive in a highly competitive market. We face imports who flood into the country, who are subsidized by their governments, and we see very, very little support when you have an escalator at this level. The other thing that it does is it waves the red flag in front of the importers, who already have, as I said in my remarks, already have 70% of the market share in our province, and with they would go after the subsidy or the excise exemption that we have for VQA wines. If that were to happen, it would literally wipe out our business. We would be forced to, as Carl said in Nova Scotia, but in Ontario as well, we would be forced to reduce significantly employment. My public market, I'm one of the few publicly traded companies, we would not be able to sustain the growth the working capital growth that we need to be able to grow our business beyond where it is. And we actually plan, it's in the public domain right now, we actually plan to double the size of our business over the next 4 to 5 years.
So if I get this straight, your concern is the exemption that's in place now for 100% Canadian wine, not the blend.
No, for both.
For both.
Yeah, for
the
both.
Exemption that there would be a WTO challenge on that.
Absolutely.
And we have Mr. Sparks, you commented that you have indications that will happen.
Yes, I understand that both the EU and the US in particular, and along with a couple of other countries, have made that statement. But to add a little weight to my colleagues' comments, we're a highly leveraged industry. I grew up on a farm myself, and this is farming at its roots. I mean, value added, nonetheless, but we are asset rich, if you want to call it that, but cash poor. My businesses are leveraged, and if the WTO infringement challenge resulted in actually the excise tax being applied against 100% Canadian wine, my bottom line would be cut in half. I'd be breaching bank covenants immediately, and I would have I would be in serious turnaround mode to really correct my business from actually being in serious jeopardy. Two of my 3 wineries are 100% Canadian, 100% Nova Scotian wine, but the largest of the 3, which really helps fund the development of vineyards, because vineyards have about a 10-year payback. Not a really smart industry to be in for a lot of investors. I mean, we have a lot of patience. Banks do not. So at the end of the day, if our business model gets challenged to that degree, the whole game changes. My largest winery is 50% 100% Nova Scotian or Canadian, and the other 50% is actually the blends. And this really keeps the lights going and keeps the overheads intact. For us to have an escalator against that excise on that part of the business with an indefinite period, the banks won't look at us very favorably going forward. So investment in the industry, not just from investors, but from actually the ability to secure funding, would dry up.
you have time? Or?
Another question. Go ahead.
Okay. You threw out the number of $1 billion. Someone, sorry if I threw out the number of $1 billion of negative impact, not the estimate. There was a number of $1 billion of a negative impact on the industry, and I take it this is from coast to coast to coast. How is that number? How is that number reached?
Westcott,
Yeah.
In 2006, the government adjusted excise, and they told us in 2006 it was going to be revenue neutral. Between 2006 and 2016, that 10-year period, excise on spirits went up almost 50%. Our business grew by 14%, inflation grew by 17%. I have little confidence in the analysis that's being promulgated by the department. We looked at the wider picture because it's not just excise. It's when excise goes on, as someone said, it's a cascading effect. The government makes 5 points on the GST on all of the excise changes, so it's a tax on a tax. When you factor all that in, which are burdens on our business and our customers, comes to $1 billion. I'm happy to provide the committee with detailed analysis of that. Just one more point on the trade file. Many members will recall that Commissioner Hogan from the EU, the Agriculture Commissioner from the EU, visited Canada last week with about 160 people. A number of those people were spirits representatives from Europe, Scotch Whisky, Spirits Europe, the Polish Spirits Association. We and they met with Agriculture Canada, they met with Global Affairs. They made it very clear to the government that they would not sit still, that there would be trade repercussions if this went through and their taxes continue to go up versus others that didn't. So that is going to be a critical issue going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
thank you both. Turning to Mr. Barlow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you very much to our witnesses as well for bringing forward some very eye-opening testimony. But Mr. Sparks, you kind of mentioned it briefly, and I'm going to ask our witnesses to touch on that a little bit more. My riding is rural Alberta, southwest Alberta. Unfortunately, I don't have any wineries, but we've got a couple meaderies that have been started. But I do have 6 craft breweries who are under construction. I have 2 distilleries under construction. But what these have done is this has brought amazing new economic opportunities to rural communities. And you touched on that a bit as what it's the impact in Nova Scotia. These are economic opportunities in these rural communities that just would not have been there. It's jobs, it's filling up real estate, but it's also bringing tourism to these communities. And to Luke, I'm going to ask you first. Jan talked a little bit about it, but we're seeing that this great growth in the beer industry across Canada. But we tried this tax regime in the 80s, and it was a disaster for the spirits industry, and Jan and I've talked about that before. But can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what the impact was on the craft beer or the beer industry, and what you see as possible ramifications of this escalator tax on the beer industry in Canada, especially the craft brewers?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Barlow. I want to emphasize that excise is a manufacturer's tax. It is the obligation of the producer to pay that tax once the product is produced. So excise, and it increasing every year, increases the cost of a brewer being in business. That leaves less money for employees, employee training, trucks, brands, development in any kind of way. They will try, and the government anticipates that every producer will try to push that tax increase and recover it from higher prices to the consumer. Consumers react as they react to higher prices. But brewers also face, and especially small producers, they live in a very competitive marketplace. They don't get to set the price. The price is dictated to them, as it is in everybody else's sector. And we compete against wine and we compete against spirits. So not always are they going to be able to push that price onto their consumers. Not always are consumers going to pay that price, which means you've raised the cost for producers, leaves less money on the table for them to invest in their business.
And, when I look at this decision in the budget, and you see that alcohol was not included in the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, was exempt from that agreement. So not only was the opportunity to allow free trade across Canada open up the abilities for you as producers to new markets, but now you're getting this additional tax. It's almost like a double whammy in the last few months. How is the both of those things going to impact your industry right now? It seems like we had two opportunities here to really provide some opportunities for our beer, spirits, and wine producers in Canada, and both times, in my opinion, the Liberal government failed them. Can you maybe talk a bit about what both of these things, these opportunities, as missed, may have on your industry?
In terms of the free trade agreement, as we've said in our public remarks on this, is that we understand that it's complex, as is excise, and that we're happy to be part of the process that will go forward in trying to open up the trade environment in Canada. But on the trade file, what concerns us and what makes it very strange that the government would at this time impose something like the escalator is that we've got a U.S. administration that is trying to repatriate jobs, repatriate manufacturing capacity, and making trade more difficult for Canadian producers. So at this time, when there's that level of uncertainty, which affects big, medium, and small brewers, we're now going to add to their problems by increasing excise every year.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that as well. One of the challenges, and my colleague mentioned the new U.S. administration focusing on tearing up NAFTA, renegotiating, but three industries have been singled out. The dairy industry, the softwood lumber industry, and the wine industry. The United States covets market share in Canada. We are among the fastest growing wine markets in the world. And as a destination for U.S. wine, it's a big deal. The problem is within Canada, so we get into a trade negotiation. Softwood lumber is about $19 billion, I believe. The dairy industry here is $21 billion. Our industry, on a revenue basis, while we punch above our weight class, we're $9 billion in terms of economic impact, we're slightly under $1.5 billion in revenue. And so, as an industry, and when we look about going into this fight, who's going to be sacrificed? I mean, we could be a pawn in this whole negotiation with the United States, and that scares the you-know-what out of us.
Jan?
This is going to make it even more difficult, and as people have alluded to, we're facing a series of challenges on the trade front. And on the internal agreement, as you said, alcohol was left out. We're seeing an increasing balkanization of the country. You have to remember that as Canadian businesses, we need a strong, vibrant domestic market because the people that we're competing with come from much larger companies. And what that does, it makes them larger, it gives them huge economies of scale opportunities. If we can't have free trade inside of Canada, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're optimistic. We hope that the structure that's been set up to look at alcohol will pay some dividends, but at the moment it's getting worse and worse and worse as the country continues to put barriers in place to products from one province to another province. And this is going to be, we're starting to see the emergence of small distillers, a great thing, right? Innovation, as you say, economic development and investment. Those small players, it doesn't matter whether you're a winery, a brewery, or a distillery, those small players are the people that are going to be the hardest hit by government reaching in and taking the money first. And so, as I said, we're contending with all different kinds of challenges right now. We have been big supporters of CETA. For this to happen on the eve of CETA, which is critically important to Canada because this is the first time where Canada is going to have a distinct tariff advantage over the United States on a huge market. So here we are going into this, trying to finalize this with some balkiness in Europe, and we're likely going to have a trade fight because of this, which you could not have worse timing. So there are a number of factors that we're all trying to contend with. Stripping investment out of the business, doesn't matter which one, is going to be extremely counterproductive. And as I said, we had this experience in the 80s, and before we had indexation in the 80s, Canada was the second largest producer and supplier of whiskey to the world, only second to Scotch. That lost decade of the 80s is when we took our eye off the international market and stopped investing, and we're now number 4, and we're becoming a distant 4th. So more pressure on us isn't going to turn this around.
Thank you, John. Mr. Dussault.
Merci à vous tous pour.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here with us in this committee. We rarely receive a panel that really is so unanimous on a topic, so I hope this will bear fruit as we deliberate this matter. My first question. Just before the question period today, we heard the Minister of Finance tell us or admit, I mean everyone knows already, that he spoke with BlackRock to develop the infrastructure bank project, and BlackRock can certainly take advantage of it if it goes through, and I'm sure they were consulted many times before the bank was suggested, as it is in the current bill. So that in that line of thinking, were any of you consulted before these amendments and adjustments affecting you in Bill C-44 went ahead? No? No?
It was consulted through this process.
Merci. Je pense que ça démontre le double standard ici.
Thank you. I think we see a double standard when it comes to consulting sectors, at least in some sectors, and one sector, many consultations, in another sector, no consultations at all. All right. Now, as in other parts of C-44, the government has been open to modifications, and I hope that we will modify this part of the bill. A question on beer. For Mr. Harford, you mentioned the potential non-constitutionality of raising taxes year by year without Parliament allowing for this on a yearly basis. Now, here in C-44, the government is being consulted, Parliament is being consulted, but in future years there will be no yearly vote as this tax escalates. Do you have a legal or constitutional opinion on this, or an opinion that you could provide us with on this issue?
Strictly from the principle of Parliament and the elected people in Parliament to protect Canadians from taxation without representation. I did not seek a legal opinion on this.
Merci. Puis peut-être ce serait quelque chose que.
Thank you. Perhaps that's something the committee could follow up on. Also, a question on spirits. I know a little bit about spirits for having studied this part of our economy. But just for clarification purposes, the excise duties are slapped on at the end of the production when the product actually comes out of the warehouse. Am I right?
As soon as the alcohol comes off the still, it's liable for tax. It goes into bond because, as one of my colleagues was saying, some of our businesses are kind of crazy. We're mostly in the whiskey business. You have to age whiskey in Canada. The legal minimum is 3 years. Most of it is 5, 7, 10, 15. Increasingly, as the consumer is moving up the quality scale and you're moving to premium whiskeys, the average is closer to 8 to 15 years. So when it comes out of maturation, you pay the excise. So, but it's a production tax right at the very first. It's the first, other than the producer's own costs, buy the grain, to employ the people, to run his distillery, it's the first external cost that's applied on the product.
Okay. Donc, le droit d'assiette serait, par exemple, sur.
The excise duty, let's say an example, a product that has to age for 3 years at least, perhaps a good deal more, the excise duty would be due when the product leaves the still and not 10 years later when the product is finally sold. Let's say it comes out of the stock and is sent to a final user.
It's into bond, so it's held in bond. You can't do anything with it. Excise is paid when it comes out of bond. So as it comes out of the warehouse, out of the barrel for blending and packaging, excise is paid at that point. So the producer has seen no revenue. He's incurred a tremendous amount of cost, A, to make it, B, to hold it for a long period of time. He's seen no revenue, and he pays excise.
Et merci pour cette précision. Sinon,
Thank you for these details and this explanation. Perhaps Mr. Sparks could answer this question. So how difficult will this be for reinvestments? What's the damages going to be? How much is this going to cost in lost reinvestments if by year there's less revenue? How will this affect reinvestments in wineries across Canada? I think most of the returns on winery production right now is instantly reinvested. Am I right? To grow the wineries, have you evaluated what the negative impact of such a measure would be across the sector?
My size and larger, certainly in the top 10 wineries in the country, it would be profound, and as much as I mentioned earlier on, as it relates to our overall financial structure. So our lenders, I mean, it would have a serious negative impact on our bottom line. Mine would be cut in half. That's serious. But I think I'm more concerned to this committee would be the other 690 wineries in the country that are smaller, that in actual fact don't have a bottom line, many of them. They have a job. I grew up on a farm. There was no profit. It was basically what we earned to live on, and that's what many. These are farms, Chairman Easter knows all about the farm industry in Atlantic Canada. You know, it's a shoestring, and at the end of the day, we will be punishing and harming a lot of small farmers in this country with the implementation of this escalator, without question.
merci.
Very quick question, if you have one, Pierre.
Je voulais juste être sûr que j'ai bien compris.
So I just want to be sure I got that right. You foresee a challenge at the WTO level from European wine producers if this measure goes through. And you seem to be certain that would go forward. I've asked civil servants at Finance Canada about this, and they haven't commented. So perhaps, Mr. Souter, you could confirm that you are quite sure that if the excise tax is raised, there will be a challenge at the OMC.
In particular, European and U.S. manufacturers, wineries will be challenging us on this issue. It hits them two ways. It hits them both in the excise because they've lost the tariff, and it also it benefits us because their prices will increase, whereas the domestic VQA wines, which is a much smaller market, won't. So we anticipate that they will challenge it. They've indicated in private conversations with people recently that they will challenge it at the WTO. And why wouldn't they? We're a large market.
Thank you both. Mr. Morrissey, welcome to the Finance Committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Mr. Sparks. I'm not sure if this is a public number, but in various industry clusters, like dairy processing, very efficient operation operates at about 1.8% net operating profit. You looked at restaurants, I believe you said 4.3%. What is that number within the winery, just at the winery level, not the farm level? I'm curious. Is that a public number? If it's something confidential, then
no. It's for publicly traded companies. Obviously, it is public. But I come from 25 years of running food companies in Canada and the United States. Coming in as an investor into the wine industry, it was the actual financial ratios were not that different. The margins are at a gross profit level are probably lower, but not that far off. The under 5% and at a net level in many cases. But once again, it is the smaller producer that really doesn't have a percentage. It's because there are jobs. I don't know what the number would be, but there are a lot of jobs actually that are directly related to owner-operators.
In the winery, it's under 5%. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
In the winery side of it.
Significantly less, yes.
Significantly less. A question you may be able to answer. On a per acre basis, grape production, how does it compare with other commodities?
Well, you mean in revenue per acre?
Yeah, revenue per acre.
Well, in Atlantic Canada, there are differences across the country in terms of the yields per acre, depending on the region, the grape variety, and the style of wines that we're trying to produce. On average, across our market, we would be about 3 tons per acre, and the cost of a ton of grapes right now, we're averaging about $1,800.
As you pointed out in your comments, and I represent Prince Edward Island, we have 4 small wineries in Prince Edward Island. I believe most are in Mr. Easter's riding. But the Annapolis Valley in Nova Scotia has been very successful. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I participated in an economic forum, and one of the participants, or presenters, was Pete Luckett of Pete's Fatigue, who unveiled a new 45,000 square foot winery that he was building somewhere in the area. So could you expand a bit more, if this tax measure proceeds the way it is, what impact it will have on rural job numbers?
If Pete Luckett was aware of and he is today, but if you know, had he been aware when he started this initiative that this was looming, this threat, he'd be having second thoughts about that investment, as he probably is today. You know, you're quite right about the Annapolis Valley becoming really a focal point for tourism. It's actually part of our brand today. Can you imagine that? Nova Scotia used to be about lobster. Today it's about wine and lobster. And so we attract about 150,000 visitors just to the wineries. More than half of the people who come to Nova Scotia, tourists, are saying they come because wine is part of the culture and they get to do this. That would, and the growth has been high double digits in the past 5 years in the region. What's more important beyond just the wineries is the the extended impact. So you have more restaurants opening up, the Culinary Institute, or the culinary combination with wine. Today, I think we're in the 4th year of the world's largest film and wine festival that's hosted in Wolfville, and it's getting bigger every year, bringing in celebrity. It's a huge impact, positive impact for rural Nova Scotia.
So take, in a hypothetical world, one of those small wineries, and what would be the financial hit to that small winery?
So an average winery in our region would be around 7,000 or 8,000 cases, and you apply the math, 63 cents a liter. A case is 9 liters. So someone do the math.
Yeah. Can't calculate it.
$40,000.
Yeah, about $40,000, which is meaningful for a
number again?
It's about $40,000.
$40,000 additional cost to that small winery. And what would be the size from an employment perspective of that winery you're describing? What would be the job numbers in a winery to support a winery like that?
5,000 cases, that would be 10 or a dozen people.
Okay, so it's significant.
Yeah,
in rural.
for sure.
Rural. Okay. I have a question for Mr. Hartford, and I do support your industry where you're coming from, because as you pointed out, is significance in small community rural Prince Edward Island. There's been a lot of work with it, and I was involved as a provincial politician in PEI when we developed some of the first wineries, and we had to use the taxing measures to stimulate them growing, and you've had some growth on the Northumberland Strait as well. But you made a comment, Mr. Hartford, on Atlantic Canada difficult situation from the beer side. Could you elaborate a bit more?
There's a lot of moving parts into the market dynamics in any part of the country, and what I was trying to highlight is that the rigidity of a CPI indexed excise isn't necessarily going to work well in every jurisdiction. And so I used Atlantic Canada, which has got demographics that are shifting, aging population, There's job challenges in certain pockets of the Atlantic Canada. In Newfoundland, with the oil prices having collapsed, the last 5 years, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it would not have been the time to automatically, without thinking, without analyzing, without studying the impact, just automatically increase taxes. And that's the point that I was trying to make. If we look at it in Atlantic Canada, sales have declined by 3.5%, and CPI increased by 5.5%. So the dynamics of the situation in that sector of the country is that we'd be increasing taxes at a time where they're trying to adjust to changing market conditions that aren't necessarily positive.
Do I still have?
No, one quick one.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So then, from both Mr. Hartford and Mr. Sparks, would I take it you would challenge the revenue projection numbers coming from a tax increase like this as ever materializing?
Yeah, I think the challenge that I would have to the finance department is this. Does it matter if all your revenue is made off of imports? Or do they have a responsibility to also make sure that their tax policies don't discourage domestic manufacturing? I think that's the challenge that I would put to Finance Canada.
Okay, thank you both, Mr. Albas, and I believe you're splitting some time with Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for what you do for the Canadian economy. I'd like just to go first to Mr. Hartford. Mr. Hartford, when I was in Nova Scotia, I had a chance to sit down, do some consultations with some local brewers. One of the youngest one of the pack, I had asked, what can we do at the federal level? He said, can you help me with my excise tax provincially? Because I guess there was a movement where the province of Nova Scotia said we're going to start charging when you give out a free sample, they were going to start charging excise on that free sample, even though they didn't. It was a loss. They were still going to do that. And so, given that context, that he was worried about that small amount of free samples that he was giving out. And he's put his, like I said, his life savings into this new project with him and his partner. Are you going to see some job losses, but also perhaps for different microbrewers or whatnot? Do you think we might see some closures based on this?
Well, that's one of the insidious things about this escalator is it's going to ride in the background over time. And everybody's going to be asking themselves, why is it that nobody can afford a case of beer anymore? Why is it that these small brewers can't access capital anymore? Why is it that they're not investing in Canada anymore? Moosehead Breweries out of St. John, New Brunswick, the day the budget came down, said this just took $250,000 out of my business that I have to find someplace else. Does that mean I don't send people on training programs? Does that mean I don't invest in winter tires for my trucks? I think there's all kinds of things that they now have to find the money for because they got a bigger tax bill.
And Mr. Sauer, you had mentioned that you're one of the wineries that actually can have different tools to finance your activities and whatnot, but I imagine the market is rather efficient, and you're going to have to say, our profitability will go down because of these increases. Is that correct?
That would be correct. We already have fielding those questions right now. We're in the midst of a major expansion that is funded through raising capital in the public markets.
And so if you have more options than the majority of wineries out there, I imagine this is going to be even tougher for the small and medium-sized, particularly ones who've just gotten into the market and are, unlike Nova Scotia, where it could be 5,000 to 10,000 an acre, in the Okanagan, we're looking at 110 to 120,000 an acre.
Yeah, in Niagara, it's up to $50,000 an acre. It does have an impact, obviously.
And again, to the point of Mr. Sparks earlier, is that each acreage is going to be slightly different because of what a farmer has to make to be able to recoup the cost for the mortgage on it. And obviously, that raises some issues with the CPI. So another reason why the CPI is not probably a good thing to be linked right across the board. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Lobb, though.
Thanks very much. And my riding's in Huron Bruce, and we've had a number of breweries come on board and some wineries come on board. And my private member's bill was on excise tax. And when I talked to one of Mr. Morneau's staff about it, they said, you're lucky we don't raise the excise tax instead of lowering it. I thought he was kind of kidding, but I guess it was true. I couldn't believe it when I heard that he was going to raise this is going back quite a while ago. But the costs the fire codes that these businesses must meet, the rules and regulations, the effluent that comes from their facilities, so many things. I know one of the breweries in my riding, they've spent about $5 million, and they figure it probably cost them $2 million more to build it in rural Ontario than in the city. And I just maybe, Jan, if you could just talk about some of the massive costs, forget the taxes, just the cost of doing business here and the red tape, let alone having to face an escalating excise tax. It's incredible, really, to think about it.
Well, there's no question Canada's a complex market, and there are many, many, many rules around our different businesses, which adds to the cost of doing business. I guess the one thing that I would mention to the committee is that keep in mind Canada, before all of this happened, already had the highest taxes on alcohol in the world, the highest. So someone suggesting that, well, this is just a little bit more, when you already have the highest taxes in the world. Our biggest competitors emerging lately is, in fact, bourbon distilleries and straight whiskey distilleries in the United States. They're not facing this kind of issue. They're not facing carbon taxes. They have free access right across the 50 U.S. states with no impediments. And if there are impediments, they get them sorted out very quickly. So all of these things, the single largest challenge facing the spirits business in Canada, and while we're all celebrating Canada's 150th birthday, I would just mention that two of our brands, Wiser's, this year is 160 years of continuous production and sale, and next year, 2018, Canadian Club will be celebrating 160 years. So we have a long, proud history of making whiskey in this country. I'd also mention, by the way, a Canadian whiskey last year was picked as the best whiskey in the world by the Whiskey Bible. So, we know that we make these fantastic products. The single biggest challenge, because we operate in a global industry, is attracting investment to the Canadian marketplace and the Canadian business. And so imagine yourself, you're an investor, where are you going to put your money? Are you going to put it into a business that every year faces an unceasing tax increase that you can't do anything about, it's just going to take more and more money? Or are you going to look for another opportunity? And I think what we're going to see is people voting with their feet across all of our businesses, not just the spirits business.
Thank you both. Before I turn to Mr. Ouellette, we're dealing with two excise taxes here. One the 2% adjustment, and one the inflation factor tied that some people call an escalator. I take it there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of concern about the 2%. What we're mainly talking about, there's concern, Jan, but what we're really talking about here mainly is the policy going forward. Is that correct?
Can I offer just a little bit of clarification?
Yep.
The Department of Finance says it's 2% across the board, and they want to be fair to everybody. The fact is it's not 2% across the board, because they've also applied it to whiskey sitting in those barrels that was made prior to 2006. On all of that product, thousands and thousands and thousands of barrels maturing, it's 7.8%. It is a massive increase. So it's not just 2% on our business. A very substantial part of our business is being hit with a one-time 7.8% increase.
So can you explain to me, how do you get to 7.8 increase? I listened to the discussion with Mr. Dussault before, and how do you get to 7.8 and what's stored in barrels? Some of it 3 years, some of it 10.
Historically, excise is a production tax. When it comes off the still, it's liable for production to pay the tax. In 2006, when the new rates were put in by the government at that time, it was for everything produced after July 1st, 2006. Everything produced before that was already produced, and so it wasn't liable to the new rate. This budget breaks tradition and reaches back retroactively and grabs money from all that product that's already been produced and is aging in barrels. And it is a massive, so the very heart of our business that's trying to appeal to the premium and super premium tastes and demands of consumers is actually facing the highest increase. All of that said, our concern remains the escalation that's being proposed every year.
I think that's a good point of clarification, though, on the other percentage as well, because I certainly didn't know that, and I do think we need an explanation from finance on that as well. What would fix that? What would fix that was done in 2006 that it didn't become a problem?
In 2006, the budget came out in March or April, whenever it came out, and the date established for the new rate was July the 1st. This one happened the next day after the budget, and as I said, reached back into a product that was already distilled and produced.
One other question before I go to Robert. Is a policy of escalator on excise taxes in place in any other country in the world that you know of?
No modern westernized economies that have a viable beverage alcohol business would be my answer.
I could just add to that.
Mr. Harford?
Yes, sir. If I could just add to that. For all of us, the U.S. is a very, very important market. The United States does not have an index tied to its federal excise rate.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ouellette, 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for coming here today. Actually, I'm going to have perhaps a little bit more pointed questions for you. So one of the things I was reviewing was the health concerns related to alcohol consumption. And so I was reviewing two articles, scientific articles. One's called The Effectiveness of Tax Policy Interventions for Reducing Excessive Alcohol Consumption and Related Harm. And it's by Elder, Lawrence, and Fielding. And it's in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine in February 2010. And they state nearly all studies, including those with different study designs, found that there was an inverse relationship between the tax or price of alcohol and indices excessive and includes excessive drinking or alcohol-related health outcomes. And among studies restricted to underage populations, most found that increased taxes were also significantly associated with reduced consumption and alcohol-related harms. And so there was another study here in Canada, in fact, that looked at alcohol pricing and public health in Canada, and it was by Stockwell, and not Stockwell Day, but Stockwell from the University of Victoria. And they recommended using the Consumer Price Index. Now, that was back in 2006. Because they said there were grave health concerns related to alcohol consumption in Canada, and there hadn't been a significant or any increase really in the effective taxation of alcohol, meaning it had effectively become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for people to obtain alcohol. And so one of my issues, I guess, is what are your comments related to the health concerns related to the consumption of alcohol?
Let me start. We all are industries that actively promote and work very hard to promote responsible consumption of our products. And generally speaking, the majority of people that use them in this country do so. That notwithstanding, Canada has evolved a lengthy series of policies that apply across the country. We have liquor boards, we have minimum age requirements, we have minimum pricing in almost every province. There are legion of efforts underway by everybody to make sure to minimize to the greatest extent possible the misuse and resulting harm that comes from our products. People are human beings. Not everybody's perfect. We all have, not sure what the right word is, weaknesses, and there are some people that are susceptible. But to suggest that simply taxation alone, and I take issue with the studies. There are equal numbers of studies saying that taxation is a blunt instrument and is very ineffective at actually getting to the people that are experiencing issues with alcohol.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Westcott. We're also in the budget 2017. You know, we also look at cigarettes. So the excise tax is going from $21.03 to $21.56, the actual effective charge for cigarettes. And so when I get into greater detail looking at the excise tax, so for instance, when you look at distilled alcohol, it's going from 11.696 going to 11.930, which is about a 21% or cents increase at retail at sale. And in the case, apparently, according to the Toronto Sun, they say it's a 5-cent increase for a case of 24 for our beers, which doesn't sound like a lot to someone like myself who might enjoy once in a while a bit of alcohol. But, you know, for me, when I look at the escalator, for me, this actually reduces the long-term political questions related to it. So, for instance, if you're a business, you like to have a long-term stable environment where you can predict how much something's going to cost in the long term. And so when you do look at an escalator, it actually removes the politics. So you don't have a government that comes in and says, you know, we're going to increase it by this amount or reduce it by this amount by according to how much lobbying you're able to be doing. But it says every year it's going to be aligned with the consumer price index because everything increases in price in this country. And for instance, the tax officials who have to go out collecting and monitoring the distilleries and making sure that this is actually occurring, this all costs money. And interesting enough, I was interested in this other final thing before I'll let you go, is I was reading something from the British Columbia Chamber of Commerce, who was looking at the federal excise tax review for distilled spirits. And apparently there's actually a difference in the raw material origin, size requirements, and duty rates. So if you get the raw material from anywhere, there's a size requirement, it's tiered, and it's at 0.06 per liter. It's going up a little bit. And this is from just last year. And then when you look at wine, if your raw material origin, if it's if the raw material, meaning your grapes are produced in Canada, I'm not sure the term in English, distilled, I guess, for wine as well. Fermented in Canada. In fact, there actually is no duty rate related to all that. And so I was just wondering if you could comment, because spirits, though, are very, there's much higher price on spirits. So I was just wondering, I'm a little bit confused about the relationship of those and that tax policy there, and if that's even changing.
So, okay, Mr. Harford?
I'm sorry, you?
No, you go ahead.
Who would you like to hear from first?
We'll hear from the story on the corner.
I'm not sure where the question was in there, because we started with tobacco and ended with wine. But on the issue of the excise tax for domestically produced 100% VQA wines, it was negotiated in 2006 that it would be excise exempt. The federal government brought that in at the government of the day at that time, and it benefited the industry. So the industry saw very strong growth, particularly in British Columbia, where they have a different regime in terms of provincial legislation. Saw a significant increase in the business there. The ICB brands, which represent, I believe it's 75% of our domestic sales, do attract federal excise. So they do pay excise, including the portion that is domestically produced. So it's a significant part. So, we do pay the excise. The issue, though, is right now we have a negotiated agreement with the European trade with regards to the exemption of VQA wines from excise. They have gone on notice and said that if we, in fact, go ahead with the increased excise tax and the escalator, or the inflationary, tying it to the CPI, they will challenge the exemption for VQA wines. That will add several dollars to a price of one of my bottles of wine, and it will literally put us out of business. We will not be able to compete. We're competing in a marketplace that has billion-dollar companies located in France, Italy, Spain, United States that want our market. The LCBO is the largest buyer of spirits and alcohol in the world, and they really want our business. So they have 70% of the market and they want more, and they've already told us that they will go up against us and will file a trade complaint on that regards.
We're going to end that discussion there. Mr. Leipert. If you could fit it, we'll give you time a little later, Mr. Harford. We're going to run out of time for questioners. Mr. Leipert.
Well, thank you. And so I think we've now heard first of all, thank you all for being here. We've now heard the Liberals' latest justification for the tax. It's a health tax now, is what we hear from that member over there. And I'm wondering how they're going to sell the. So on the one hand, we're taxing alcohol because it's a health hazard, but we're legalizing marijuana because it's okay to smoke marijuana. So this is the rationale that we deal with on a daily basis, I guess. I wanted to just take a couple of minutes and ask a few questions of Ms. Reynolds in the restaurant business, because I'm from Alberta, and not only has the economic downturn substantially impacted the restaurant business in Alberta, restaurants closing left, right, and center, but we had at the first of the year, we have a carbon tax that came on. We now have a minimum wage that is going up to $15, I think, by next year. I think there might have even been some alcohol taxes in the provincial budget, and now we've got the excise tax. Obviously, the restaurant business is going to be one of the hardest hit because of this tax. Is there any? Do you have any sort of? Have you sort of run the numbers, if you might, as to what the bottom line impact is? Because it seems to me that I'm not in the restaurant business, but I think the largest margin is in the alcohol side of the business in the restaurant business. I would.
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
No,
and
unfortunately. Although I have to say that the licensed premises are the ones who are struggling the most right now. The full service independent restaurant operators are the ones that are having the toughest go of it, particularly in Alberta. Saskatchewan, our operators are also having a difficult time because of the economic downturn. In the March 22nd Saskatchewan budget, the same day the federal budget came down, they increased the provincial sales tax on alcohol up to 10%. So that was a double whammy for the industry in that province. But in terms of how operators are going to cope with this, I don't know. You're absolutely right. We're seeing closures, we're seeing layoffs, we're seeing reduced hours for employees. Our industry has been devastated in Alberta, and this is just going to hurt more. I can't give you specific numbers province by province what the impact will be, but when you already see sales to licensees of alcohol stagnating, and you see the resistance that our members get from customers to any type of price increase, and you see the reaction to tourists who come to Canada and find the product priced so much higher than in their home countries, yes, it's going to have a serious impact.
I wanted to ask another question because as an outsider looking at both the craft beer industry and the wine industry in this country, there's been tremendous growth in the last, let's say, 10, 20 years in both. Is that fair? Would you both in the craft beer industry and in the wine industry, would you consider your businesses innovative?
Yeah, absolutely. We to demonstrate the level of innovation, in 1990, there were 400 brands of beer sold in Canada across the country. There's over 4,000 brands today.
Same with the wine business.
Yeah, we've seen significant increase in the number of wineries. We have 700 wineries in the country, growing every day.
And so I know I've heard just about every time Mr. Sorbert asks a question, he's proud of the budget because it's an innovative budget. So it's innovative when you can go into Southern Ontario and hand out hundreds of millions of dollars, but it's not so innovative when it comes to your industry because we're adding taxation on. Is that fair?
Innovation is the lifeblood of our industry.
Precisely.
80% of the growth, and this comes from the LCBO, from NSLC, from our liquor boards across the country. They report this every year. 80% of the growth in wine sales every year is new innovation. So we need to continue to feed that innovation pipeline.
So would you consider this an innovative budget? Thank you.
That's it. Time's up, Mr. Fonseca.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. On the innovation, I understand that the beverage manufacturers would be eligible for the $1.26 billion in Strategic Innovation Fund, and I have to say, coming from a riding that is actually it was considered actually the wine capital of Canada, Mississauga East Cooksville. Believe it or not, in 1811, the Canadian Vine Growers Association was set up there. They had wineries all along the Credit River. That's all changed now today, but that is the history of my riding. I look to, as we heard from Mr. Sabera, Mr. Ouellette, and others speak just about what spirits, what wine, what beer means to our economy in terms of tourism, in terms of as an economic driver. And at all levels of government, we've got different taxes on those products. At the federal level, I've heard different numbers that have been used by the witnesses, and I'm trying to really get down to the exact number. So what I've got here in front of me, maybe you can help me out with these numbers. So when it comes to a bottle of wine at the federal level, meaning the changes that have been brought forward, it would mean less than 1 cent per bottle of wine. That's, okay, we heard from Mr. Ouellette that for a case of 24 bottles of beer, it would be about 5 cents for the case of 24. And for a bottle of spirits, on a per bottle, about 7 cents per bottle of spirits. But I think it was 63 or 64 cents was thrown out, and some other different numbers. Can you kind of break that down for me, how you came to kind of those numbers? Because I've got different numbers here, and I'm just trying to kind of figure this out.
So one of the challenges that we have, and why you would see so many different numbers, is that regionally, so this consistently, the 63 cents per liter of wine or on a bottle of wine is consistent, of course, because it's a federal excise across the country. But the provincial liquor boards all have varying degrees of markup structures. We have varying degrees of provincial tax.
Federal.
That is not federal.
That's not federal. I'm just talking about right here at this committee. What we're talking about are this budget federally. On a bottle of wine, we're talking 1 cent.
No, but the impact's far greater than that. The 1 cent is at the producer cost. So then you tack on, we have to make some money. We're not a charity. We add, if we're trying to make a 20% profit, we would add to that. The provincial government adds to that significantly. So on a percentage, yes. So on a $10 bottle of wine, so $9.95 bottle of wine, so the 1 cent ends up being 5 cents at the top because of all these additions. The federal provincial government.
So is that your number? Is it 5 cents?
When it gets to the price.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So price is at $9.95. I can't go to $10. The LCBO will not allow me. So I have to absorb it, or become uncompetitive, which in an industry where we're doing well by pricing ourselves up in markets that are not going up in price, we become uncompetitive.
If I may
But isn't it a level playing field? Isn't everybody going to get that increase? Where are you saying you lose your
competitors in France will absorb that. They won't even notice it. They're billion-dollar companies. I'm a $30 million company, including all of my business. It would just absolutely destroy our industry. We've got small producers who are generating 5, 6, 7,000 cases, $150,000 to $250,000 worth of revenue. They can't afford to lose a sale and can't afford to absorb it. You heard earlier that it's $40,000, for example, on Devonian.
Those producers would not be VQA producers.
It would be a combination of both VQA and ICB.
But the VQA are exempt.
Are exempt, but
so what percentage would be exempt?
About 20. Of the total wine sales, less than 10%.
Less than 10% would be exempt. Okay. Did you want to add?
Yeah. So both want in. Go ahead, Mr. Sparks.
Sorry, there is a huge differential between liquor jurisdictions. So in Ontario, for example, that 63 cents per liter excise tax becomes manifest to be 90 cents by the time it's sold through the LCBO. A much higher number by the time it's actually absorbed by the licensees, the restaurants. In Atlantic Canada and Nova Scotia in particular, so the markup that the individual liquor board takes on that 63 cents as it flows through the system, 90 cents in Ontario, $2.30 in Nova Scotia. That's a huge, huge tax on our business.
Mr. Harford?
Yeah, I don't get to ask the questions, but I am going to answer your question with a question, if that's okay. We hear this time and again when we're meeting with finance officials, trying to tell them why this is a big deal. They say it's just 5 cents a case. If it's not such a big deal, if it's just a little number, why do it? Why is the government going to risk putting this into the cost structure of small Canadian producers when we've got NAFTA challenges, Trump issues, all kinds of things going on? Why do it? Why now?
You know, whenever I go outside of Canada, I find that I always want to bring ice wine with me. And I want to ask about the ice wine. Would ice wine all be domestic product? Would that, and it would be for export, right? So if they're looking at exporting that product, that would be completely exempt from any of these taxes. Is that correct?
Yeah, ice wine is a very, very small proportion of the industry in Canada. Domestic consumption of ice wine is very, very small. To Mr. Harford's comment, this tax, although it's not much, it's $1.8 million worth of revenue to the government, it jeopardizes a $9 billion industry.
Peter, one quick one, because we are over time. We have other witnesses. I know this is one of the most controversial areas. That's why I'm letting us go a little longer.
I guess I'm asking if you've done an economic impact, and what would that mean in terms of, do you have a measure? What would it mean to the industry in terms of a drop in consumption?
We haven't measured the drop, but we can tell you that it would put the $9 billion at risk. At what level, I don't know at this point. It's significant.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of questions to end up on. One, the trade challenge from the Europeans. I understand that there is, at one point in time, there was an agreement established with the Europeans that 100% Canadian wine could be exempted from the excise tax. You're saying if the escalator goes in, we'd be in violation of that agreement and be challenged?
That's correct.
Where do we find, I guess we can find that agreement somewhere. I'd like to see that agreement. Secondly, I think it was Mr. Westcott, in your remarks you talk about the experiment in the annual automatic indexing of liquor in 1981 to 1986. How was that? I mean, if you talk to finance, they're going to tell you the CPI, the index to CPI at that time was different than the indexation at this time. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but that's what we're told. So how was that proposal then different from now? I mean, I know I was one of the ones borrowing money at the time, and I know inflation was 10% at the time. So what different factors were there then compared to now? And is it a and this is I'm not trying to pin you down. Is it a fair argument to say that the same impact could happen on the industry today as happened through that experience in 1981 and 1986? What's your opinion?
It's an absolutely fair assessment that it will have similar effect. No one can know for sure, and no one can even guess because there is no analysis. Finance didn't do any work. They haven't done any work. There's no information forthcoming about what this means. And as I said, based on what happened over the last 10 years, we're not particularly inclined to take them at their word based on what we've seen. Our excise revenues to the government have gone up by almost 50%. Our business went up 14%, inflation was 17%. Are those guys you would believe? So absent seeing some analysis and some details, I can't really answer that. We do know that it was a horrific experience for everybody. Everybody. And people saying to me, well, it's different, don't worry about it, it can't be the same. I'm not really inclined to believe that. And the thousands of people whose jobs depend on that, middle-class Canadians, farmers all across this country, those are the people whose livelihoods we're gambling with because we haven't done the work and we don't know those answers.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier too how the 2% increase impacts the whiskey and other liquors that are in barrels. Can you, if you've got a further explanation on that, can you forward it to us in writing?
We'll provide that to you.
I'd be quite honest with you. I still don't understand how that works, and I'd like I'd like to see how you get to that calculation if you could forward it to us. With that, we are substantially over time and taking from the next panel, so I do appreciate all of you coming forward and telling it like it is from your perspective. We'll suspend for a couple of minutes while we change panelists. Reconvene. on Bill C-44, if we could get witnesses to come to the table and members. Where's our list of witnesses? Yeah. Okay. Oh no, mine's probably under the. Oh, there it is. Look at that. Okay, welcome, folks. We have Canadian Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, Norman Lafreniere.
That's right.
President. As an individual, and Frank Ryder with the Canadian Association of Mutual Insurance Companies as well. As an individual, Nicholas Rivers, Associate Professor, University of Ottawa. And Mr. Marc Andrieu with the Canadian Taxi Association, and not the other witnesses, are they may be here shortly. We'll see. So we'll give the floor to, I guess, the Canadian Association of Mutual Insurance Companies first. Mr. Ryder, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I first of all, I want to begin by thanking this committee for the opportunity, the chance to meet before you. The Canadian Association of Mutual Insurance Companies is an association of 79 mutual and cooperative insurance organizations operating in Canada. 75 of our members are what we would call farm mutual insurance companies, i.e. smaller companies created by farmers for farmers, mostly in the 19th century, several even before Confederation. We're here to present our concern in relation to Bill C-44, which, if adopted, will eliminate the tax exemption for insurers of farming and fishing property originally introduced in 1954. That was at a time when farmers and fishers had little choice other than to obtain insurance from their own mutual insurance company. And to this day, in some regions across the country, that need still exists. You have to remember that farm risks and fishing risks, they represent the high values, and oftentimes they are total losses. While it would appear that the elimination of the tax exemption will affect only the insurance companies, this is absolutely not the case. This tax relief provided by the exemption is not retained by the mutual insurance companies. It is either passed along to farmers and fishers through lower rates, premium refunds, and it also allows us to tolerate higher loss ratios on farm and fishing risks. Indeed, the mutual insurance companies of farmers and fishers still exist for one reason: to provide affordable insurance protection to farmers and fishers on an at-cost basis, without a profit motive. The large majority of active food-producing family farms and fishing enterprises across Canada continue to be insured by their small mutual insurance company. Farmers and fishers still, to this day, make up the majority of board members governing their company.
To qualify for the tax exemption, insurers have to maintain a minimum farm fishing premium of 25% of their total premium written. According to the Department of Finance, in 2014, some 40 companies were still benefiting from the tax exemption, 37 of which are farm fishermen mutual insurers, most of them small mutuals. A number of these farm mutual insurance companies report that their continued existence depends on the tax exemption. The 3 non-mutual insurers benefiting from the tax exemption do so through a special tax exemption, giving them an unfair advantage over mutual insurers. Because of the evolution of the rural landscape and the resulting effect on insurance, the average farm mutual insurance company reports doing 15% of its business with farmers and fishers. In CAMIC's pre-budget submission, we recommended that the qualifying threshold be reduced to 5% of the total premium written, in concert with the elimination of the special tax treatment given to the 3 non-mutual insurers. The suggested measures would have been cost revenue neutral to the federal government. While the government has not agreed to bring about the recommended changes, we fear that the elimination of the total tax exemption as proposed under Bill C-44 will have a very negative effect on mutual insurers and farmers and fishers that they insure. We therefore recommend that paragraph 149(1)(p) and subsections 149(4.1) to 4.3 of the Income Tax Act be maintained as they are currently. In closing, let me point out that farm mutual insurance companies provide significant benefit to the small rural communities in which they are located. They ensure that insurance is available at all times, even when the market is tight. Mutual insurers are also significant employers in their community. They purchase locally sourced goods and services whenever possible, and they participate in the betterment of their community. Thank you for considering CAMIC's recommendation.
Thank you both. Turning to Mr. Rivers, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm going to speak about the public transit tax credit. In the past couple of years, I've conducted research to try to understand the effectiveness of the public transit tax credit. Based on this research, as well as research conducted by others, I'd like to make 3 points. The first point is that the public transit tax credit has failed to achieve its goals of substantially increasing public transit usage, reducing congestion, or reducing air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from transport. This conclusion is based on statistical evaluation of the policy that I've conducted with one of my students. The study used data from the 2006 census and the 2011 National Household Survey and focused on responses to questions asking individuals how they travel to and from work. We established the effectiveness of the policy by comparing travel patterns of individuals who were and who were not eligible for the tax credit. Because the tax credit is non-refundable, only individuals that pay income tax are eligible to receive the tax credit. Individuals that don't pay income tax could therefore serve as a control group, while individuals who did pay income tax and are therefore eligible for the tax are the treatment group. Our study compared changes in public transit usage in the treatment and control groups from before and after the tax credit became available. We statistically controlled for a large number of other factors that could impact transit ridership in order to isolate the effect of the tax credit. The results of the study suggested that the tax credit had only a very small effect on public transit ridership, raising the proportion of individuals regularly using public transit by about 0.25 to 1 percentage point in comparison to a baseline usage of about 12%, or baseline transit ridership of about 12%. While this increase in transit ridership is desirable, it is not a substantial change from the status quo. Importantly, our study finds that the great majority of individuals that claimed the public transit tax credit, between 92 and 98% of all claimants, made no changes to their behavior. They would have used public transit regardless of whether or not the tax credit was available. This brings me to my second point, which is that despite not achieving its goals, the public transit tax credit is expensive. The Canada Revenue Agency reports that in 2011, the tax credit cost about $170 million in foregone revenue. Based on the findings in my study, this suggests that between $1,200 and $4,800 are required to induce one additional person to take public transit. It is also possible to calculate the cost of reducing carbon dioxide emissions using the public transit tax credit. My study suggests that reducing 1 ton of carbon dioxide emissions using the tax credit costs between $1,000 and $22,000 in foregone government revenue. This is much higher than the cost of other carbon mitigation opportunities, and leads me to conclude that the tax credit is not cost-effective. The final point I'd like to make is that the public transit tax credit is regressive. Because it is a non-refundable tax credit, many low-income individuals are excluded from the tax credit by design. Further, higher-income households likely have more access to tax planning advice than lower-income households and are more likely to receive the tax credit if eligible. Studies by the Department of Finance, as well as studies by academics published in the journals Canadian Public Policy and the Canadian Tax Journal, show that the public transit tax credit is disproportionately claimed by middle or high-income households to the exclusion of low-income households. Overall, the tax credit likely had a small regressive effect on the distribution of income. For the 3 reasons that I've described, I support the elimination of the public transit tax credit. In doing so, I'd like to make 2 additional points. First, while I have studied the public transit tax credit and have concluded that it is expensive and ineffective, I have no reason to believe that it is uniquely so compared with other tax credits. There exists research that suggests that several other tax credits in the federal system are expensive, ineffective, and regressive. I support the continued examination of tax credits in the federal tax system that is being undertaken by the federal government with a view to improving the transparency and efficiency of the tax system. And second, while I don't think that the public transit tax credit is a well-functioning policy, I do strongly support the objectives under which it was developed, including reducing congestion and reducing transport sector emissions. Research suggests that the best way to achieve these objectives involves imposing distance-based fees on road users or emissions-based fees on emitters, such as road pricing, congestion pricing, or greenhouse gas pricing. I strongly encourage the further implementation and study of these options by governments in Canada. Thanks very much for the chance to address the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rivers. And with the Canadian Taxi Association, Mr. Andrew Way.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to support the amendments to the increased collection of HST, GST from the rideshare companies and affiliate drivers. My name is Marc-Andre Way. I'm the president of the Canadian Taxi Association. I'm also the chief operating officer of Coventry Connections since 2004, operating 1,500 taxis in 6 municipalities in Ontario. I'm also co-owner of Capital Taxi, which is a business that's been operating in Ottawa since 1938. My experience in ground transportation business is extensive in both taxi, limousine, black car, and sedan business. I'm an active member of the community. I hold a seat on the Transportation Committee of the Greater Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the Taxi Advisory of the City of Ottawa. I'm also a board member of the Taxi Limousine Paratransit Association, which is an international association celebrating its 100th year in 2010 of service. We are presenting today to support the government's decision to address the significant inequity in the application of GST HST that has a substantial impact on us and our members. The Canadian Taxi Association is the voice of the taxi industry in Canada. Our members consist of the largest companies in most major cities across Canada. We speak for an industry of 30,000 taxi owners and operators and over 50,000 taxi drivers, which undertake over $2 billion in consumer transactions on an annual basis. All taxi operators in Canada are required to be registered for GST and HST purposes and to charge, collect, and remit HST and GST on their fares regardless of their annual revenue. Rideshare companies such as Uber, Tapcar, and their drivers should be required to be registered. Typically, today they are not registered and do not charge or collect, report, and remit GST or HST. This creates a significant competitive disadvantage for our drivers and members and provides a direct competitive advantage to the rideshare companies and their drivers. The recent budget of 2017 levels the playing field for us. Over time, changes in the economy have made a number of provisions in the Canadian tax statutes less relevant than when they were first introduced. To address these changes, Budget 2017 proposes to amend the definition of a taxi business under the Excise Tax Act to leveling the playing field and ensure that rideshare businesses are subject to the same GST and HST rules as taxis. Our reasons for strongly supporting these measures above are to ensure a fair, equitable, consistent application of GST to all suppliers in the private transportation industry, including taxis and rideshare companies. Maintain a competitive private transportation industry unburdened by the arbitrary tax preferences. Simplify the application of GST and in private transportation industry for both consumers and suppliers. Ensure the stability of the federal government's HST GST revenues for the rideshare companies and their drivers, just as our members and drivers collect, report, remit for the government's benefit. Improve the operation of GST and for the benefit of all Canadians. In conclusion, the past unfair and inconsistent application of the excise tax small supplier registration exemption poses a significant threat to the competitiveness of the private transportation industry. Unless amendments to the excise tax are made, small supplier, rideshare companies, and their drivers will have an arbitrary but significant price advantage in the market. Consumers will be forced to seek smaller suppliers, rideshare company drivers, in order to receive a lower fare. As a consumer continues to increase their reliance on the services offered by rideshare companies and their drivers, the federal government's GST revenues from the private transportation companies will steadily decline. Accordingly, we support the Government of Canada and the Department of Finance amendment to the excise tax to address this inequitable application of the GST-HST between our drivers and members and the rideshare companies and their drivers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andre Way. With Transport 2000 Quebec, Mr. Pepin, who's the President of the Council, and Madam Claude Janou. Probably isn't close, but welcome, Secretary of the Board. Go ahead, Mr. Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Un grand merci aux membres.
Thank you very much to the members of the Standing Committee on Finance for having us here today. Transport 2000 Quebec is an association that is not for profit and which has worked for 40 years in Quebec to improve the use of mass transportation and develop new transportation for citizens of Quebec. We want to see high quality, affordable public transit. We work with our partners and all the various regional chapters through Transport Canada. Transport 2000 was surprised, very surprised by the announced cut by the federal budget to the transit tax credit. Over 5 years, about $1 billion will be taken out of the pockets of the users of mass transit. And with this income tax, with this tax credit of 15%, our citizens will recuperate there will be about $180 billion, rather, that will be going up in smoke. Amongst what is available, we talk about the impact of the tax credit on the ridership. Professor Rivers from the University of Ottawa, who made a study about this, and he said that between 0.25 and 1% represents a major gain across Canada. And in fact, the tax credit had an effect on the use of the transit networks. There was a move from 35,000 to 155,000 new riders. You must remember that some $170 million has gone back into the pockets of those people who have used mass transit. And this represents $1.38 billion in terms of transit passes that were purchased by riders. And with each Canadian who purchased this, there was about a 1,000% increase in the transit passes. Any increase in the costing system, the pricing system, will result in a drop in ridership. Many people will go back to using their cars. And in fact, this is something that will represent some tens of millions of trips less throughout the country. According to the PTTC Toronto Transit Commission,
had a positive impact on TTC MetroPass sales and ridership growth, and eliminating it will erode at least some of these gains. Si tous se tournent vers l'automobile, ce sont des millions de tonnes de...
If all of these cars represent some millions of tons of GHG emissions every year that are released into the environment, many low-income families cannot participate in this tax credit, but it is a highly suspect argument, because there are many people who would like to do so, but because of the pricing are not able to. But what you would have would be some sort of social pricing that would be making it more affordable for these families, rather. This measure is going to prevent many people, between 20 and 40%, of attaining the use of mass transit. And in fact, mass transit for low-income companies means that more has to be spent at the time of purchase. So when there is too high an increase in the pricing, some people feel they have to walk rather than use a bus. Canada cannot go against its own policies. Withdrawing this tax credit flies in the face of the objectives of the Government of Canada for the middle class, to improve the lot of the middle class, to start up the economy again, and to have an environmental transition phase. All efforts should be made to deal with this in terms of mass transit, to support and encourage all Canadians to use mass transit. What we need is a cocktail of measures from the government for the citizens, measures that would encourage the citizens, provide incentives to them, financially support programs and participation in a neighborhood-based programming.
The work that you do, we are going to go to very concentrated rounds, 3-minute rounds, so that we can get through the list. So you get 3 minutes. Mr. Greywald to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses that came today. I'm going to have my questions directed at Mark. I'm the son of a taxi cab driver, so this was a really big development for us in our neck of the woods. Can I just get your comments on how the current system works? So if you drive for Beck Taxi in Toronto, how are you expected to register, and how is your GST remitted?
So a driver, sorry?
It would be HST in that.
Okay. So a driver today, before starting, once he gets licensed by the city, his next step is to be registered as a taxi driver with the government, so gets a GST number. The GST is that the way the GST works, or the HST works in Ontario, is that it's built into the meter fare. So there's no choices. Our drivers must be registered in order to collect the HST. Every charges that they go through by paying the brokers are imposed HST, and they go through the process of accumulating their fares, making their calculations, and being able to remit it either quarterly, monthly, or it's either quarterly or monthly. Yes.
So each individual driver remits it. So, like,
yes.
For example, if there's 5 drivers that drive for Beck, they don't remit it to Beck, and then Beck remits it to the government. No. Each individual driver remits it.
Remits his own portion of the HST, and the brokers or the company remits their portion on the fees that they charge.
Yeah, and so each driver is licensed by the city or municipality that they drive in, and they're also registered to collect GST.
Absolutely, yes.
And it doesn't matter if they make $10,000 a year or $90,000 a year.
Correct. It starts from $0. Yes.
Okay, and so now the definition that's going to be changed now in our budget this year is going to change the definition of taxis to include ride-sharing applications, such as the prominent one is Uber.
Yes.
So how would you anticipate, as somebody that's been in the industry for so long, how it should apply to Uber?
So Uber's fares are not fixed by the licensing authorities. And therefore, if anyone would take an Uber today, the fare is calculated on a distance and by a multiplier depending on surge pricing or no surge pricing. There's really, it all depends on demand. They should be adding, as we are adding, the HST to the final fare. The difference between us and Uber is that we have to include it in the meter, whereas they can easily simply add that to the calculations when they remit the invoices or the receipt to the customer.
Okay, so it essentially, in order for it to be fair, because this is all about tax fairness, in my opinion, that's what the statement is, that if you're operating a taxi, you're in Uber, you're essentially doing the same level of business, and you should be applying the same level of tax. Ideally, what it would be that if you're an Uber driver, Uber would change its policy to collect it at the fare stage. And whether it was the brokerage that remitted it or the driver that remitted it, it would make an even playing field.
That's right. It all depends on how Uber treats its drivers, either they're independent or dependent contractors, such as taxi drivers, or as employees. If they're employees, Uber needs to collect those taxes from the drivers and from all the rides and remit them to the government. Yes.
Thank you, Raj. Mr. Leipert.
Thank you. Thanks for all of you for your presentations. Because of limited time, I'm going to focus strictly on the transit pass decision to cancel the transit pass credit. And with all due respect to my guests on the corner, I think Mr. Dussault is going to ask you some questions. So I'm going to have a couple of questions for Mr. Rivers. If I heard you correctly, your study indicated that most of the benefit was not in the low-income category, but it was in a medium to higher income category. Now, we hear a lot about the middle class, which we can't really define, but it sounds to me like this is a tax increase for the middle class. Is that fair?
This is a tax increase for the middle class?
Well, it's taking away a tax credit for the middle class. Is
okay,
that
I got
fair?
you. Yeah. So if you look at I've got the numbers from the Department of Finance calculations here. So these are using the Canada Revenue Agency claims, and they've analyzed who's getting who's claiming the tax credit and who's the amount of claims overall. And so they're finding that the lowest income people claim the tax credit less than all the other incomes. They're finding that individuals between say $37,000 and $123,000 of individual income have the highest claim ratio, and individuals above $123,000 are roughly even. So it'll be a tax. The way I understand it, very simply, it'll work out as a transfer from people with $37,000 to $123,000 to people earning less than $37,000.
Right, and that's what these guys call the middle class, I think, even though they can't define it. And those are my constituents largely who take transit downtown to work in Calgary. And so while I think it's a dumb decision on the part of the government to cancel this tax credit, I actually think it'll be a political gain for me because, as I said, I think it was a dumb political decision, but and it may make an economic sense, but politically I think it was a pretty dumb decision. So now, and what are the numbers of people that actually claimed that credit last year, tax year? How many claimants?
I don't know if I can pull that off the top of my head. Let's see here. Total number of claims, around 1 million. Is that right? 1.7 million.
That's a lot of voters. Thanks.
Right.
Okay, I'm done.
They're not all in Calgary, though, Ron.
They're spread out
Mr.
nicely.
Dussault, 3 minutes.
I'll take the time you did. Mais merci.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here with us today. And I will continue on this matter of the transport passes. According to your estimate, it's a matter of people who use mass transit. Can I ask you who are the people who in the majority use this type of transit? Are they 150,000 and more, or are they in a different tax bracket? How do you define what the middle class is? Do they represent the middle class? Well, we didn't really examine the data from Statistics Canada, but with respect to the municipalities and the provinces, I can say that there is data. And according to Mr. Rivers' study, those people from $37,000 or so and above do claim the tax credit. So it's a proportion of the population which reflects the distribution of income that you find in general. And have you seen an increase in the number of users? pursuant to the, you talked about a 0.25 to 1% increase in your remarks. Yes, but it was an improvement in terms more of what was being offered, a freeze on the rates. But with respect, and I must say that when economic activity is stable, the ridership is good. It's stable, but it does rise as well. These are the principal factors. But we do have a policy in Quebec from 2007 to 2012 for industry. The offer of service increased by 28%, and the ridership also increased by 14% at the same time as the tax credit for transit passes. It is, you had two programs existing side by side. Yes, an infrastructure program is very important, but as I have to say again that it is a cocktail of measures that should be offered by the government. Thank you very much. I would like to turn to the mutual insurance representatives. I think that you were surprised by the proposal in C44. Nobody expected to see that. I would hazard a guess. And I was surprised myself, and I made some representations to try to help you. We wanted to improve your situation, but in actual fact, what the result was quite the contrary. And you see that result today. Can you describe for us what the impact will be on the co-ops? For mutual insurance, will there be more competition? Will you be more competitive with respect to your competitors, or what will happen for those businesses? And what do you say to the government that says, oh, well, we're doing this because to date the insurance companies are advertising on the internet, can be reached on the internet, all that technology is there, and so it's available to all people. Insurance companies might well be on the internet, but in the agricultural sectors and in the fishery sector, you don't find it on the internet rather. It's found through our companies, through the mutual companies. There are mutual companies, as I have said, for both fishers and for farmers. They are the majority of the members of the boards of directors for these companies. So it's not surprising to see that these companies exist in the fashion that they do. In terms of not-for-profit, it's very important, of course, to ensure the survival of our companies. But we are not for profit. We return the money that we make back to the fishers and to the farmers. It's not like the rest of the population. It's not just to them, because we give it back to the fishers and to the farmers, but that represents a portion of our business figures that is really subsidized by other types of insurance that we provide for other entities.
We might have a chance. Mr. Sabero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome everyone to today's committee. I do want to quickly speak about the tax credits and the efficacy of tax credits, specifically when a tax credit is refundable versus non-refundable. My understanding is this tax credit or tax expenditure was what's called a non-refundable tax credit. Is that correct? I'll ask Nicholas.
Oh, the public transit tax credit is a non-refundable tax credit. That's right.
So if you do not have any taxes owing or taxes payable, you actually don't benefit from the tax credit.
That's right, yeah.
So for a large segment of the population, the public transit tax credit doesn't do anything for them.
This is the main reason why I would conclude that this tax credit is regressive, that it doesn't benefit low-income people that don't pay income tax.
Low and you would call it, one who's used as strata as low and middle-income people. Really, anyone making up to, like, say, $50,000, $60,000
That's right,
a year.
Yeah. There's a pretty big range of people that don't pay income
exactly.
tax.
So those funds would probably, I think, in my humble opinion, be spent investing in transit, creating, putting extra buses on the road, getting people the incentive to actually get on the bus. There's more routes, there's more frequency. That's the way to incentivize folks to get to work quicker, because that's the big determination, is how fast you can get to work and get home. So if your streets are clogged, transit isn't occurring as fast as possible, you'll take your car. right? Our plan, our $180 billion of infrastructure plan over the next 12 years, we'll invest a lot in public transit. I think the number's around $30 billion. So on the efficacy side, a non-refundable tax credit actually doesn't do much.
That's right. I mean, I think that on the efficacy side, the study that I did suggested that this is not that efficient or not that effective of a tax credit, that the overall effect is quite small, 0.25 of a percentage point increase in transit.
Very minimal.
Sorry?
It's very minimal.
Right, very small number, yeah.
The bigger bang for your buck, and this is the taxpayer dollars that we're talking about, is to invest the money in transit, in public transit.
Right, I'm not able to make a comparison. I haven't studied the other side of things, but I would say that this doesn't look like that big of a bang for your buck to me.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'll be safe to say that I think that's my opinion, and I think that's pretty correct.
Right.
Right?
You can have an opinion.
Okay. So how much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
You have time for about a 15-second question.
The question for Mr. Lafreniere, if I pronounced that correct, to Norman. Excuse me, I don't know this issue on insurance companies and this mutualized insurance companies in place. The implications for the farms and fishermen, and I grew up in a fishing town in northern British Columbia. I read the budget line item. It's a $10 million annual thing in year, because it doesn't come into effect in 2018.
No.
Can you give 20 seconds of background? This is sort of an obtuse issue.
Well, on the fishing side, you may know the Pacific Fishermen's Mutual Insurance Company. In their case, I think the gross premium written is about $5 million. Every cent of their benefits is returned to their members. So they have enough of the capital accumulated over the years. So when they do business with their members and they make a profit, they return that profit, 100% of it, to their participating members. A company that will be affected negatively.
And what exactly are they insuring? Are they insuring on income, or are they insuring on assets?
Well, they insure the boats, the fishing property of those fishermen, also their residences. So they insured both, and at the end of the year, they do $5 million of gross premium written, and the profits that they generate out of that, they return to their members. And we see the same thing when we insure farmers. Farm mutual insurance companies make a profit, they return that profit to their members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I know it well. I deal with the mutual insurance company in PEI, and I had a major fire, so I'm highly recommend insurance at one time in my life. Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you have that public service announcement out of a private loss and letting people know about it.
That's why you got insurance.
Exactly. Thank you to all of our witnesses today. And again, there's one of the most fascinating parts about being a member of Parliament is that you get to know a little bit about many different things. And so I really appreciate the presentations by each witness today. Mr. Rivers, I just wanted to start with you. First of all, I understand your argument. So I'd like to ask you a question, though. Mr. Saborba had mentioned the tax credit and the non-refundable type. Do you think that having a non-refundable tax credit can change the way that someone responds to an incentive?
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
So, pardon me, I guess I should have phrased it better. For example, when I wasn't in here when the tax credit for fitness for children was first introduced. But one of the arguments we heard from the Liberal Party is that it's not fair because it's not refundable. So we actually made in the last Parliament it refundable. And that didn't change the Liberals from taking it away. Have you done any research on other tax credits like the child tax credit?
No. So I guess I would say there's two issues there. One issue that I brought up in my comments was that this, to me, looks like an overall regressive tax credit. Mm-hmm. And I think by making it refundable, you would change that. But the other issue I brought up is that it's not that effective or not that cost effective, and you wouldn't address that issue by making it refundable.
Sure. Okay.
So it would continue to have a small impact on transit usage, and it would continue to be an expensive way to motivate people to take transit.
Yeah. And so You know, obviously the government has introduced new tax credits, tax credit for teachers. I would say perhaps that might be a great topic for you to look at some point, because I know many school districts in British Columbia, the parent advisory councils actually give a payment to the teacher. And one of them, I know it's $1,000 they give to the teacher, and then the teacher buys school supplies. Now, if that person's being honest, I think we don't have an issue with that, but if that person then claims the tax credit for monies that they were given, I don't think that's exactly what the tax credit was for. So, but I certainly appreciate the work you've done and discussing your ideas here. Wanted to talk to the mutual insurance companies. So many of yours are either mutual or cooperative, means that if the retainer, basically at the end of the year, if there's any retained earnings, those are returned to your membership. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's pretty straightforward. We collect premiums to pay claims. Whatever's left over from our claims and our operating expenses, we do need to keep an amount for reserves, like in the event for unforeseeable things. But for many of those companies, we're able to return that back to our policyholder members. What that does is that reduces their operating costs and for the price of their insurance, because we haven't met anybody yet that likes to pay premiums for insurance.
Thank you. I'll cut you there, Dan. Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you very much. So I guess my questions are for Monsieur Norman Lafrenière et Frank Ryder. Alors, la question c'est relié.
The question is related to this. In removing this exemption, this tax exemption, will this have an effect on the availability of insurance for farmers or fishers? Will they be able to get this type of insurance in another way elsewhere? It's not that they're not capable of finding it elsewhere, but they are the ones that set up the mutual companies a long time ago, particularly in the case of farmers. In the instance of fishermen, it was later. That the important thing is that insurance is there and available at a reasonable price. That they are the ones who make up the board of directors. And necessarily the major part of the business dealings with fishers and farmers is through mutual insurance that belongs to their company.
Myself, I would reiterate that for some people, eventually it will affect availability, because we have a tendency to insure those things in rural Canada that the big P&C insurers don't want to deal with. And farming and fishing is one of those. So it eventually may affect availability.
Jim?
When the market was tight, you know, other companies were leaving and we were there to supply that market, both for farmers, fishermen, but also for the local communities. When the stock companies leave, we're there to stay. We have nowhere else to go, and basically we're there to serve them. So we've proven that in the past.
And the farmers and fishers whom you represent, how many actually are you working with? How many clients are using your insurance products, not large company products? On a total of about 170,000 farms, we, the mutual insurance companies, are certainly covering 140,000 of them. 140,000, correct. And do you have any figures for the fishing area? Yes, we cover them, the mutual companies that cover agricultural owners, but the Pacific Coast fishermen, though, that covers mostly fishing companies and groups. Do you have comparative data showing the difference between the services you offer and larger insurers offer? What do you mean by comparison? Let's say a graph, some comparison, comparing all the services you offer. No, we don't have that, but there are 3 companies in the this area that have a special clause due to the income on companies. We've asked the government to correct this and to keep the money in the system, but rather than correct this error, the systemic error, the government decided to cut the tax exemption for us, the insurers of farming and agricultural properties.
On that point. This offer was made on the 3 companies. You have it in your paper. Who was that made to? Department of Finance, and they give you reasons why it wasn't undertaken?
No.
But it was made to the Department.
It was made to the department and also to the minister's office and to the committees, the fishing committee, the Fisheries and Oceans Committee, the Agriculture Committee, as well as the House of Commons Finance Committee.
Can you give us further, do you have any correspondence of any exchanges that you could make available to us?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Everything.
you. Mr. Albas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to, again, the insurance case. So obviously you can't suddenly offer stock if you need to capitalize and whatnot. So basically, you're going to have to raise fees at some point. And obviously, because of this exemption change, that means there'll be higher costs to your members. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, when we were in, yes, when this committee actually went to Prince Edward Island, we actually heard the same thing from many of the fishers that were there, that they were concerned about rising costs from things like carbon taxes and whatnot. So this will just be an additional raise to them, which certainly I would imagine has been challenged. Have you already heard back from your members about the issue?
Well, we have heard back from our members. Of course, they are extremely disappointed to see that going. And we also heard from some of the members that their own existence may be at stake in future years if they lose that tax exemption. So,
really, is it so that's that big of a difference on the margins for some people?
Well, many of our companies do more than 50% of their business with farmers. It is their raison d'être, if I can call it that way. So you lose the tax exemption. For them, it's a big issue.
Okay, so basically, your presentation today just said, please don't do this.
Exactly.
Is that what you're
We're
asking
saying?
of the government?
Don't do any of that. We prefer not correcting what's up there. We're saying that it could be improved, but we prefer no improvement than losing it all. Mm-hmm. So we're asking you to take a single look and not do anything, please, so in order that we keep it the way it is.
Okay. All right. No.
Mr. McKinnon, last question.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Rivers, my question is for you, although I'll ask Mr. Pepin to speak as well if there's time. But Mr. Pepin cited in his remarks, he cited your research, leading him to the conclusion that we should keep this tax credit. Yet you, with the exact same research, I expect, come to the exact opposite conclusion. I wonder if you could respond to those comments by Mr. Pepin.
Right. I think the way I understood the comments was that my research demonstrated that there was an increase in public transit usage as a result of this tax credit, and that's correct. The reason I came to a different conclusion is that the cost of the increase, in other words, the cost effectiveness of the policy is poor. So the study that I did suggested that getting an extra person to ride transit with this tax credit costs between $1,200 and $4,800 for each additional public transit rider, which is very expensive. Similarly, the cost to reduce carbon emissions with this policy was between $1,000 per ton and $22,000 per ton. These are really high costs compared to other options we have. So it's not that it didn't do anything, it's that it did something in a very expensive way. That's why I had the results I did.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Pepin, would you like to respond to that as well? Clarify?
Well, that's why in our report we suggest that there must be another measure, alternative measure, to give a tax credit to transit users that would be more efficient. But you need all kinds of measures to encourage the use of transit by Canadian, especially if you want to reach our goal in the GES reduction. So it's very important. And as a matter of fact, like we said, it's an increase of 15% for most of the users who claim the tax credit. But what we see is usually when there's an increase in fares, the elasticity of fare is about 25-30%. So it could be more than what's estimated by the Professor Rivers. So, but we don't know. I mean, you have to test it, of course, to see the results, like they did in Quebec with the program. But the program they had in Quebec, everybody thought that a 50% elasticity on headways, better headways between buses, was too much. But they got to their goal. So really, it was a success. So you have to try it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, first time we've heard a difference of opinion at this committee, folks. Thank you all for your presentations. We will have to suspend and go to from Global Affairs Canada. We'll go to committee business first. Also, Mr. Lafreniere, if you could send the clerk that correspondence, that would be helpful. Mr. Sever?
Mr. Rivers, do you have the report that you have or you produced? Can you table that, or can you send that to us?
I can, if you tell me how, yeah.
Okay, please.
We'll get the clerk to talk to you afterwards, Mr. Rivers, and she'll give you the address. So we'll suspend for 2 minutes and do committee business for however long that takes, and then go to Global Affairs Canada on Division 20 of Part 4. Could we members come to the table? We'll call the meeting back to order, and I believe Ms. O'Connell, you have a motion to present to committee on the subject matter.
So I don't have a formal written motion, but I do think that we need to ensure that when we do entertain clause by clause as the normal procedure, I do think we have to establish parameters to make sure we understand how long we'll be debating clause by clause, etc. So it's my understanding that previously, and so perhaps I can get assistance from the clerk, but I've kind of highlighted a few key points, and then if we want to discuss it in terms of making sure that we have parameters for clause by clause. So the first being that the committee proceed to clause by clause of Bill C-44 no later than Monday, May 29th, which I think is something we already agreed to. That the chair may limit debate on each clause to a maximum of 5 minutes per party per clause. The committee may sit until 9 p.m. on May 29th, 2017, and start again on May 30th at 8:45 a.m. If clause by clause consideration has not been completed by 9 p.m. on May 30th, all remaining amendments be deemed move and the question be put by the chair. And then the last would be after completion or passage at the committee that the chair to report to the House as soon as possible. I'm gathering there would be some more technical language in that, but I think those are the key elements that would be normal in preparation for clause by clause.
Okay. Any discussion? It's kind of a typical motion to handle a bill. Mr. Albas.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Maybe perhaps Ms. O'Connell can clarify. Just on just the process, Mr. Chair. If it's deemed to have been approved and reported by, I think you said which, the Tuesday night?
Tuesday, 9 p.m.
Yeah. So I'm just worried that if there are large amounts that have not done, then there's a particular clause that maybe I think is more interesting than other ones, or perhaps some of the other members would like to. Is there going to be some flexibility from the chair to make sure that we actually do our job and go through those sections? Because I would really hate to see it where there are certain clauses that don't get the scrutiny that they deserve.
Well, I think at least the way we've tried to operate in the past, I think the motion is saying 5 minutes per clause. There's a lot of clauses in the bill that there will be virtually no discussion on. I think we've moved pages and pages at a time in the past. But there is some other clauses that's going to require more than 5 minutes, and I've been, in my experience as chair, I've allowed more time in those clauses that I think we all at committee realize probably need a little more debate. But what is suggested to be firm is the 9 p.m. deadline on May 30th. That gives us from 8:45 in the morning till 9 p.m. at night, which seems a fair bit of time. I would think we'd be able to finish by that time, but government's perspective, they do need a deadline in order to get this bill to the Senate as amended. Mr. Leipert.
I think we're pretty much okay with all of this. Is it 5 minutes per clause or 5 minutes per party per clause?
Per party per clause?
Yeah, 5 minutes per party per clause.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that clear. I guess the only other thing that I would ask is that maybe before we commence at 8:45 on Tuesday, if need be, and there's still significant work to be done, is it possible to pull out clauses that you know are going to need more discussion, deal with those first, and then if we have to approve clauses in a lump at 9 o'clock at night, they're the least contentious?
I don't see a problem with doing that,
Then,
Ron.
then I think we're in good shape.
I think if each of the parties could kind of look at the bill and give us an indication of the areas where they expect is going to require more discussion and debate. If I know those, we can go through those and make sure those are done, and then come back to
Just
those.
one more question. This is just a question. Is there any kind of minority report on this?
No,
No? Okay.
not on the Budget Implementation Act. Yeah, a bill is, yeah. Okay, is there any further, Pierre?
Just a question also. Why don't we deal with amendments? Because we have to submit amendments like before certain dates. And we deal with all the amendments, and then we deal with the clauses that was no amendment proposed to them.
Yeah.
So at least we do the scrutiny of each and every one of them. But we can maybe start with the one that has been
amendments
proposed. Yeah, proposal.
Yeah, I think that's normal procedure. Yeah. Okay, I think we're all right with that we would deal with the clauses that there's amendments proposed to. Have a discussion on the other clauses that people deem necessary to debate, and then the rest of the bill. Okay? All right, we're agreed. Could we have Global Affairs Canada come forward, Part 4, Division 20, Invest in Canada Act, Mr. Marcotte, Mr. LeBlanc, and Ms. Pellerin. Okay, and Mr. Marcotte, I believe you have opening remarks. Invest in Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Budget Implementation Act introduces the enabling legislation of the Invest in Canada Hub announced in the 2016 Fall Economic Statement. This new federal body is to work globally in partnership with federal departments as well as with provincial and municipal investment attraction offices to ensure that Canada makes the most of every opportunity to attract global investments. Foreign direct investment makes a significant contribution to the Canadian economy, creating high-paying jobs, spurring innovation, and driving trade. In 2015, in Canada, foreign-controlled multinationals enterprises employed 1.9 million Canadians, representing 12% of our jobs and 30% of manufacturing jobs. They are responsible for 49% of all of our merchandise exports and 37% of all business expenditures in research and development. In its 2016 October report, the Advisory Council on Economic Growth stated that Canada stands to gain enormously by attracting more FDI.
Determines first the nature of the entity as a departmental corporation. Second, its mandate and functions to create the partnerships required to leverage all of what Canada has to offer, brand Canada as a premier investment location, provide a one-stop service to assist investors in navigating the investment landscape, and actively pursue anchor investment projects and deliver world-class aftercare services. The Act also determines, third, the governance of the entity, where the Minister provides directions, the Board of Directors manages the organization, and the CEO operates it on a day-to-day basis. Fourth, the Act determines the general powers and a specific authority of the entity over administrative policies. And finally, fifth, its human resources regime. Overall, the enabling legislation allows for the creation of an organization able to interact effectively with business while being subject to the necessary oversight and accountability measures.
Thank you very much. Trying to look how long the bells were here. So turning to questions then, Mr. Dussault first.
Merci, merci pour votre présence. Mais ma question, c'est...
Thank you, and thanks for being here. I would like to know how this differs, really, from what's already underway when it comes to attracting foreign investment, foreign direct investment. I imagine there's already a good deal of work being done for that through our networks, embassy networks, for example, overseas, who are already carrying out this type of work to encourage investment in Canada. So how does this differ, and why would this be better? Why would this be an important move for Canada? Well, you're correct. Our trade delegates in the embassies and consulates representing Canada around the world do attract investment. Comparing Canada to other countries, we see that over the last 10 years, the number of investment promoting agencies is up by 50%. And Canada, at this point, is disadvantaged compared to other countries, nevertheless, that sometimes have more resources for foreign promotion of investment and also have a one-stop shop to help investors once they're within their country. Let's say you have a foreign investor with a lot of questions about the business climate here, how things work, the programming. The agency that we intend to create will be a one-stop shop to help make these services accessible and promote Canada more aggressively overseas. All right, so this body would be working mostly within Canada or overseas? Well, the entity would work exclusively in Canada, working closely with our trade delegates who are outside of Canada. Of course, they will be contacting foreign companies in other countries, but they will be based here in Canada to serve them here in Canada, to help them make decisions and decide, more particularly, to invest in Canada. And where will the head office be? Not yet decided. But the infrastructure bank, that's already been decided even before the bank is enacted, right? No, that hasn't been chosen either, the city where it would be housed.
All right. I would say this, and this you can tell this to the powers that be, Mr. Mercado. I think I would be speaking for all of us here on some of the. This, in my view, is a good news story, but it should be a separate piece of legislation and not in a budget bill. I think we're seeing too much of this, where we have things that or legislation that could be handled separately is a good news story to profile. It's in the budget bill. It's not going to get enough debate. I mean, I personally support it, but in any event, it's a problem when we see these areas in a budget bill. Having said that, I know that's not your fault, not your responsibility, but I couldn't sit here and not say it. So with that, thank you very much for your presentation. And I didn't introduce you fully. Mr. Mercado is the Director General, Investment and Innovation, International Business Development, Investment and Innovation, Global Affairs for Canada. Andre LeBlanc is the Executive Advisor of the Transition Team, same area. And Ms. Pellerin is Counsel Legal Services. Thank you for your efforts, and thank you for your appearance. Could we call up, and we only have a few minutes, but Division 21, Treasury Board Secretariat, Mr. Ermuth and Ms. Mueller. What? Mayor? Ms. Mailer. Floor is yours on modernization of service fees. I know you've been here about 4 times before and didn't get the chance, so we've got a very short time. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Like most other governments, the federal government charges fees for services that provide recipients with benefits beyond those received by the general public. Some examples of these fees include fees for services, such as ice breaking or inspection of cattle for export, fees for products, such as marine navigation charts, fees for the use of a facility, for example, a wind tunnel, and fees for rights or privileges, so for example, the right to use publicly owned or managed property. It should also be noted that the Service Fees Act will not apply to bridge tolls, as the federal organizations responsible for administering these federal bridges do not fall under the scope of the legislation. For all fees that are subject to the Act, the amount charged is normally intended to recover all or part of the product or service that's being provided. In setting the fees, the government must consider the private versus public benefit of the associated fees. In other words, the extent to which a product or service provides a benefit to all Canadians, for example, food safety, versus specific businesses, for example, profit from the sale of safe foods. Under the current legislative framework governing fee setting, many organizations have not changed their fees for years, if not even decades. As a result, taxpayers currently subsidize a relatively high percentage of the products and services, many of which primarily benefit users of specialized government services. A modern legislative framework will support a more cost-efficient delivery of its services. It will also help improve transparency and oversight and ensure those who set fees are accountable to Canadians. Key changes included under the Service Fees Act include the fact that all fees that would be subject to the legislative framework, an improved accountability regime that would ensure fee payers are reimbursed when performance standards are not met, a streamlined approach for setting fees and speeding up the process, the introduction of an automatic escalator clause to ensure that the fees maintain pace with actual costs, and increased transparency to provide Canadians and parliamentarians with an annual information on fees. This includes both mandatory departmental reports that would be tabled annually in Parliament and a requirement by the President of the Treasury Board to make available a consolidated report. It should also be noted that introducing new legislation will not increase fees beyond the proposed inflationary escalator. Fees are set under ministerial authority after consultation with interested stakeholders. The modernization of the legislative framework opens the door for departments and agencies to look at rebalancing the burden of costs between general taxpayers and those benefiting from those specialized services. At this point, happy to take any questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Mr. Dussault.
Quand on dit les frais sont soumis à un escalier de...
When you say that there's going to be an escalator clause on these fees, would this apply to all fees under this Act, under this measure? But, of course, there are other places where there will be fees, but what's covered here, they will all be covered and by the same escalator clause.
If enabling legislation does not already have an inflationary indicator in it or an inflationary factor in there, that the CPI type of inflationary indicator would be necessary for all the fees. So, in essence, the fee escalator would apply across all. Again, some would be under the legislation, unless, of course, the enabling legislation has its own.
OK. Et corrigez-moi, mais la plupart des frais qui sont...
Me if I'm wrong, but most of the fees charged by government bodies and governments are statutory, yes?
There are some that are statutory, but there are others that are as well. So some of them, again, would have, and actually, quite frankly, even some of the ones that are statutory are not necessarily have a built-in inflationary escalator. So this would ensure that, again, that the fees, as inflationary costs of delivering those services and products goes up, that the associated revenue from fees would keep pace with those changes.
Si, par exemple, il y a un frais dans un règlement...
For example, if we have a regulation establishing a dollar cost for fees, but if we have an escalator clause for that, you've got a regulation written in 2010 and is charging $5. In 2017, it would no longer be $5. It might be $8, right? But in the regulation, we'd still read $5. Would we have changed the regulation?
Individual set of regulations, I'm not necessarily sure how to answer that question specifically. The point would be is that the regulation that might state originally that it was set at $5, if that regulation or statutory said, and it would increase at 2% per year, then obviously the fees would go up on an annual basis. If there was nothing in the regulation or the legislation, then through the current legislation, the escalator would kick in. One of the things, though, that we are also putting in is a requirement on an annual basis, tabled in Parliament, each department then to publicly state how much each of those fees is going up. So it would be made clear to parliamentarians as well as to Canadians as those fees are increasing.
Okay.
I thought we might be able to get through this section, but we have a number of questioners, and I can see why. So we aren't going to finish. You're going to have to come back again. And we will have to hear from you at about 5:30 tomorrow, just for the committee's information, because we've got 4 witnesses instead of the 6 we had hoped for in each panel tomorrow. We'll have 4 from 3:30 to 4:30, 4 witnesses from 4:30 to 5:30, and then at 5:30 we will have Global Affairs or Treasury Board come back, and then we'll go to District 18 and Infrastructure District, Division 18 and Infrastructure, Division 13 and Immigration Act, and Division 14 on EI Act. And I have one question for you to think about in the meantime, Mr. Irmuth. When the inflationary factor, the escalator, is put in, what incentive is for a department to do things more efficiently and cut costs? That's a huge concern I have with escalator clauses. How do you create the pressure on the department to create efficiencies on their end and cut costs? So you can have that answer tomorrow. With that, we'll adjourn till tomorrow at 3:30. You only got 3 minutes to get to the vote. Yeah. Meeting adjourned.